Picture this. You work your entire life, sacrifice everything, raise someone else's child as your own, and then they stab you right in the heart when you least expect it. That's exactly what happened to me. And if you think family loyalty means something in today's world, you're about to get a reality check that'll shake you to your core. My name is Scarlett Hayes. I'm 28 years old, and I just bought my dream house. Not just any house. We're talking about a 5-bedroom mansion in the hills with floor-to-ceiling windows, a pool that looks like it belongs in a magazine, and a kitchen so perfect it could make Gordon Ramsay weep. I earned every square foot of that place through blood, sweat, and building my tech company from nothing. Have you ever worked so hard for something that when you finally get it, you can barely believe it's real? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. That's how I felt standing in my empty mansion, keys still warm in my palm, thinking about how far I'd come. But here's the thing about dreams. Sometimes they turn into nightmares faster than you can blink. I was supposed to move in the next morning. Everything was planned. The movers were scheduled. My whole life was packed in boxes, ready for this fresh start. I even bought champagne to celebrate my first night in my new home. That's when my son Marcus showed up. Now, Marcus isn't my biological son, but he might as well be. I found him in the foster system when I was 21 and he was 15. Most people thought I was crazy. A single woman barely out of college, taking on a troubled teenager? But I saw something in Marcus. Maybe I saw myself. Do you know someone who changed your entire life's direction? Someone who made you throw away all your original plans just to give them a chance? That was Marcus for me. He walked through my front door that evening looking like he hadn't slept in days. His usually perfect hair was messy, his clothes wrinkled. But it wasn't his appearance that made my stomach drop. It was the way he couldn't look me in the eyes. "Mom, we need to talk," he said, and those 5 words made my blood run cold. I'd been calling myself his mom for 7 years, ever since the adoption papers were finalized. He'd been calling me mom just as long. But something in his voice that night sounded different, distant, like he was already pulling away. "What's wrong?" I asked, setting down my champagne glass. Marcus fidgeted with his wedding ring. He'd married his girlfriend Tiffany 6 months ago in a ceremony I'd paid for. 22 years old, and convinced he'd found a soulmate. I had my doubts about Tiffany from day one, but I kept my mouth shut. When you love someone, sometimes you let them make their own mistakes. "Tiffany and I have been talking," he started. My heart began to race. Has someone in your family ever started a conversation this way? You know it's never good news when they have to mention talking to someone else first. "She thinks it's not fair," Marcus continued, still not meeting my eyes. "What's not fair?" He gestured around my beautiful, empty house. "This. All of this. You living here alone while we're crammed in that tiny apartment." I felt like someone had slapped me. "Marcus, you know I worked for this house. I built my company from nothing. But you had help," he interrupted. "You had me. All those years when you were building your business, I was there. I helped you. I supported you. Doesn't that count for something?" The audacity of his words hit me like a truck. All those years I'd worked 18-hour days to keep food on our table, to pay for his school, his clothes, his dreams. All those dates I'd turned down. All the opportunities I'd passed up because Marcus came first. Always Marcus. "Are you serious right now?" I whispered. That's when he finally looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Entitlement. Greed. Like I owed him something beyond the 7 years of unconditional love and sacrifice I'd already given. "Tiffany thinks you should give us the house," he said. The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. "Give you the house?" I repeated, sure I'd heard wrong. "You're single. You don't need all this space. We're married. We're planning to start a family. It makes sense." I stared at this young man I'd raised, this person I'd loved more than my own life, and felt something inside me crack. Have you ever had someone you trusted completely just tear your heart out and hand it back to you in pieces? "And if I don't?" I asked, my voice barely steady. Marcus looked away again. "Tiffany says if you really loved me, you'd want what's best for our future. She says if you can't support our marriage. He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. The threat was crystal clear. Give them my house, or lose my son forever. Like this story if you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted. Share it if you know someone who's been manipulated by family. And comment below, have you ever sacrificed everything for someone only to have them demand more? But here's what Marcus didn't know about the choice he was forcing me to make. Here's what nobody knew about the decision that was about to change all our lives forever. Because when someone you love holds your heart hostage, sometimes the only way to save yourself is to let them think they've won. Subscribe if you want to know what happened next, because what I'm about to tell you will explain everything about why that moment in my mansion felt like the end of my world. 7 years earlier, I was 21 and thought I had my whole life mapped out. College degree, check. Dream job at a tech startup, check. Perfect boyfriend named James who looked at me like I was his entire universe, check. We were even talking about moving in together after I graduated. Have you ever been so happy that you actually worried something would go wrong? That was me at 21. Life felt almost too perfect. Then I got a call that changed everything. My social worker friend Rebecca called me on a Tuesday morning. Scarlett, I know this is crazy, but I have a situation. There's a 15-year-old boy who's been bounced between foster homes for 3 years. He's about to age out of the system, and honestly, I'm running out of options. Why are you telling me this? I asked, but even as the words left my mouth, I knew where this was heading. Because you were in foster care.
You know what it's like.
And this kid, Marcus, he reminds me of you at that age. Smart, angry, but underneath all that armor, he just wants someone to care. I should have said no. I was barely an adult myself. I had student loans, a tiny apartment, and dreams of my own to chase. But Rebecca sent me Marcus's file, and when I saw his photo, this sullen teenager with eyes that looked way too old for his face, I recognized something. I saw myself.
Picture this.
Marcus had been abandoned by his drug-addicted mother when he was 12. His father was never in the picture. And then they stabbed you right in the heart when you least expect it. He was difficult. That's exactly what happened to me. The reports described him as withdrawn, and if you think family loyalty means something in today's world, running away, you're about to get a reality check that'll shake you to your core. My name is Scarlett Hayes, who kept getting rejected by the people who were supposed to protect him. And I just bought my dream house. I met Marcus not just at a coffee shop downtown. We're talking about a 5-bedroom mansion in the hills with avoiding eye contact. Everything about his body language magazine. Don't get attached because I'll just disappoint you anyway. Gordon Ramsay weep. So I earned every square foot of that place through blood, with a bitter laugh, sweat, and building my tech company decide for nothing. I'm too much trouble. Have you ever worked so hard for something that when you finally get it, but I'm not looking for perfect. Believe it's real? I'm looking for real. Viewers. Kindly tell us where you're watching his expression and what time it is. Just slightly, but I warm welcome to the family. That weekend, James enjoy the story. And I were supposed to go apartment hunting. That's how I felt standing in my empty mansion. I spent Saturday converting my tiny spare room about how far I'd come for Marcus. But here's the thing about dreams. But I could see sometimes they turn into nightmares faster than you can blink. Are you sure about this? I was supposed to move while we assembled a desk for my Kia. Everything was planned. No, the movers were scheduled. But being sure, my whole life was packed in boxes. When Marcus moved in, this fresh start, our life became chaos. I even bought champagne to celebrate my first night in my new home. Curfew. That's when my son Marcus showed up twice in his first month. Marcus isn't my biological son, but James started. He might as well under the pressure. I found him in the foster system when I was 21. James said one night he was after I'd missed another date. Most people thought Marcus was having a panic attack about a woman barely out of college. He needs me right now. On a troubled teenager. I explained, but I saw something in Marcus. James Maybe asked, I saw myself, and I could hear years of frustration who changed your entire life's direction. That question someone who made you throw away all your original plans just to give them a chance. What about my needs? That was Marcus for me. What about the life I planned through my front door that evening looking like but here's the thing about love. Real love. His usually perfect hair was messy. His clothes sometimes it means choosing someone else's appearance that made my stomach drop. It was the way he couldn't look me in the eyes. Sacrificing the life you planned for the life that's right in front of you, he said. The breaking point came 3 months later. Blood run cold. I was supposed to graduate calling myself mom for 7 years. An incredible job. The adoption papers were finalized. James had been accepted to graduate mom just as long. Everything
something
was
in his
falling
voice
into
that
place.
night sounded different.
Then Marcus got
distant,
arrested for
like
shoplifting.
he was already pulling
I'll
away.
never forget sitting
What's
in that
wrong?
police station at
I
2
asked,
a.m.
setting down my
watching this
champagne
kid
glass.
I'd come to love
Marcus
try to
fidgeted
disappear
with
into
his
wedding
wedding
ring. The officer
He'd married
explained
his
that
girlfriend
Marcus could
Tiffany
go to
6
juvenile
months ago
detention
in a
and
ceremony
with
I'd
the responsible
paid for.
guardian who
22
would
years
he appeared
old
for his court
and
date.
convinced he'd found
I'm
a
sorry.
soulmate.
I
Marcus
had my
whispered
doubts
in the
about
car
Tiffany from
afterward.
day one.
I know
but
you
I
probably
kept my
want
mouth
to send me
shut.
back now.
When you love
I
someone,
looked at this broken
sometimes
teenager
you let them make
and
their own
realized
mistakes.
something that would change
Tiffany and
both
I
our
have been
lives
talking,
forever.
he started. He wasn't
My
just
heart
testing
began
me
to
anymore.
race.
He
Has
was
someone in
expecting
your
me to
family
abandon him,
ever started
just
a
like
conversation
everyone
this
else
way?
had.
You know
Marcus,
it's never good
I
news
said,
when I have to mention
I'm not
talking
going
to someone
anywhere.
else first. But we
She
need to
thinks
figure
it's
this
not
out
fair.
together, Marcus continued.
That night,
still
I
not
called
meeting
James
my eyes,
and told him I couldn't
What's
move
not
to San
fair?
Francisco.
He
I had to
gestured
stay
around
and
my
help Marcus
beautiful,
finish high school.
empty house.
I had to choose.
All
so
of
you're
this.
choosing him over us.
You living here alone
James
while
said
we're
quietly.
crammed in that
I'm
tiny
choosing him
apartment.
over my old plans.
I felt like someone had
corrected.
slapped me.
There's a difference.
Marcus,
you
but
know I worked
James
for this
couldn't
house.
see the difference. And
I built my
honestly,
company from nothing.
I couldn't blame him.
He was 22
But
and
you
in
had
love.
help,
He interrupted.
and he never
You
signed
had
up to
me.
co-parent
All
a
those
troubled
years
teenager.
when you were building your business,
We broke up
I
2
was
weeks
there.
before
I
graduation.
helped you.
Comment
I
below
supported you.
if you've ever
Doesn't
had to
that
choose
count for
between
something?
love and
The audacity
responsibility.
of his words
Share
hit
this
me
if
like
you
a
know
truck.
someone who gave up their
All
dreams
those
for
years
family.
I'd worked
The
18
next
hour
5
days
years
to
were
keep
the
food on our
hardest
table
and most
to pay for
rewarding
his
of my
school,
life.
his clothes,
Marcus,
his dreams.
and I figured out
all
how
those
to be a
dates
family.
I'd turned down.
I started
all
my
the
tech
opportunities
companies on
I
my
passed up
laptop while he
because
did homework
Marcus
at the
came
kitchen
first.
table.
Always
we ate
Marcus.
ramen noodles for
Are
dinner
you
more
serious
nights than
right
I care
now?
to admit, but
I
we made it
whispered.
work. That's
Slowly.
when he finally looked at
Marcus
me,
began to
and
trust
I saw
that I
something
wouldn't
in his
leave.
eyes I'd
His
never
grades
seen before.
improved.
Entitlement.
He made friends.
Greed.
He started calling
like
me mom
I owed
without
him
the
something
awkward
beyond
pause
the
first.
7 years
The
of
day he
unconditional
graduated
love
high school
and sacrifice.
I cried
I'd
harder than I
already
had at
given.
my own graduation.
Tiffany thinks you should
This
give us the
angry,
house, he said.
broken 15-year-old
The words hung
had
in the
become
air
this
like a
confident,
bomb waiting to
kind
explode.
young man. Give you
And
the
I'd
house?
gotten to be part
I
of that
repeated,
transformation.
Sure, I'd heard
Thank
wrong.
you. You're
He
single.
said,
hugging
you
me
don't
after
need
the
all
ceremony.
this space.
For not
We're
giving
married.
up on me. We're planning to
hug
start a
felt
family.
like validation
It
for
makes sense.
every sacrifice I'd
I
made.
stared at this young
But
man
now,
I'd raised, standing
this
in my
person
dream
I'd
house
loved
7
more
years
than
later,
my own life,
listening to
and
this
felt
same young
something
man
inside
demand
me
I
crack.
give him everything
Have you ever
I'd worked
had someone
for.
you trusted
I wondered
completely
if I'd
just
made
tear
the
your
biggest
heart out
mistake
and
of
hand
my
it back
life.
to you in pieces?
Because the Marcus
And if
hugging
I
me
don't,
at graduation,
I asked,
and
my
the
voice
Marcus
barely
threatening
steady.
to cut me out of his
Marcus
life
looked
unless
away
I
again.
handed over my house.
Tiffany
felt
says
like
if you
two
really loved
completely
me,
different people,
you'd want what's
and
best for our
I was about
future.
to find out which
She
one
says
was real.
if you can't support
If
our
you're still
marriage,
watching, hit that
he
like
didn't
button
finish the
because
sentence,
what I
but
discovered about my
he didn't need
daughter-in-law
to.
was about to
The
turn my
threat
world
was
completely
crystal clear.
upside down. Give them my
After
house,
Marcus left
or
that
lose
night
my
with his
son
ultimatum.
forever. I
Like
couldn't
this story,
sleep.
if you've
I
ever been
kept replaying
betrayed
our
by
conversation,
someone you trusted,
trying to figure out
share
where
it
I'd gone
if you know
wrong.
someone who's been
When did my
manipulated by
grateful
family.
son become
And
this
comment
entitled
below,
stranger
have you
demanding
ever
my house?
sacrificed
Then it
everything
hit
for
me.
someone only to
Marcus
have them
had
demand
said,
more?
Tiffany
But
thinks
here's
about
what Marcus
5
didn't know
times
about
during
the
our
choice he was
conversation.
forcing me to make.
Not I think,
Here's
or
what
we
nobody
think.
knew about the
Tiffany
decision
thinks
that was about to change
Have you ever
all our
realized
lives
that
forever?
someone you love is
Because
being
when
controlled
someone
by
you love
someone
holds
else,
your heart hostage,
it's like watching a puppet show
sometimes
where you
the
can
only
see the
way to
strings,
save
but the
yourself
puppet
is
can't.
to let them think they've
So
won.
I did what
Subscribe
any
if you want to
concerned
know what
mother would
happened
do
next,
in
because
2023.
what I'm about to tell you will
I
explain
went full detective
everything
mode
about why
on
that
social
moment
media.
in my mansion
Tiffany's
felt like the end
Instagram
of
was
my
public,
world.
and 7
Scrolling
years
through it
earlier,
was like reading
I was
a manual
21
on
and
manipulation.
thought I had my whole
Every
life
post
mapped
was
out.
calculated.
College degree,
Every caption
check.
was designed to make
Dream
her look like
job
the
at a tech
victim
startup,
of someone
check.
else's selfishness.
Perfect boyfriend
3
named
weeks ago,
James who looked at me
when you
like
work
I
so
was his
hard
entire
but still
universe.
can't
Check.
afford the life you
We were
deserve,
even talking
crying
about
face,
moving in
hashtag
together
blessed,
after I
hashtag
graduated.
grateful, hashtag
Have you ever been so
struggling but
happy
smart.
that you actually
2
worried
weeks
something
ago,
would go wrong?
some people have
That was
so
me
much
at
and
21.
don't even appreciate
Life
it.
felt almost
Meanwhile,
too perfect.
we're here
Then
trying
I got
to
a
save
call
our
that
future
changed
baby's
everything.
nursery to
My
hearts,
social worker
hashtag
friend
future
Rebecca
goals,
called me
hashtag family
on a
first. Tuesday morning.
1 week ago.
Scarlett,
I
it's
know
hard
this is
when
crazy,
family doesn't
but
support
I have
your
a
dreams.
situation.
But
There's
we'll
a
make it work
15-year-old
somehow.
boy
Red
who's
Heart
been bounced between foster
never give you up
homes for
hashtag
3 years.
toxic family.
He's about to age out of the
Wait.
system.
Future
And
baby?
honestly, I'm
My
running out of
heart
options.
stopped. Marcus
Why
hadn't
are you
mentioned
telling me
anything
this?
about a baby.
I asked,
But there it was.
but
Hashtag
even as
after
the words left
hashtag
my
about
mouth,
pregnancy,
I knew where this was
nurseries
heading.
and growing families.
Because you were in foster
I
care.
dug deeper.
You know what it's like.
And this kid, Marcus, he reminds me of you at that age. Smart, angry, but underneath all that armor, he just wants someone to care. I should have said no. I was barely an adult myself. I had student loans, a tiny apartment, and dreams of my own to chase. But Rebecca sent me Marcus's file, and when I saw his photo, this sullen teenager with eyes that looked way too old for his face, I recognized something. Tiffany's Facebook was even worse. She joined 3 different groups: dealing with toxic in-laws, how to handle selfish family members, and getting what you deserve from rich relatives. In one post, she'd written, "My mother-in-law has this huge house she doesn't even need, but she won't help us start our family. Some people are just too selfish to see beyond themselves. How do I make her understand that family comes first?" The comments were exactly what you'd expect. A bunch of strangers telling her she deserved better, that I was obviously a terrible person, that she should give me an ultimatum. Share this video if you've ever dealt with someone who turned your family against you. But it got worse. So much worse. I started researching Tiffany's dating history. Her previous Instagram account, under a slightly different name, told a very different story about who she really was. 2 years ago, she'd been engaged to a guy named Derek. A guy who, according to his posts, had just inherited money from his grandmother. Their relationship lasted exactly as long as it took him to spend the inheritance on a failed business venture. Before Derek, there was Michael. Michael, who'd posted pictures of the expensive gifts Tiffany expected, designer purses, jewelry, weekend trips to expensive hotels. Their relationship ended abruptly after Michael's posts started being about struggling to pay rent. And before Michael, 3 other guys, all with one thing in common. They'd all had money or family money or expected inheritances. And they'd all been left broke and confused when Tiffany moved on to her next target. My son wasn't her husband. He was her latest mark. But the discovery that made my blood run cold was in the comments of an old post. Tiffany had written about being excited for a new beginning with someone who finally understands what I deserve. One of her friends had commented, "Girl, you said his mom has serious money, right? Time to secure that bag. Money bag." Tiffany's reply, "Trust me, I have a plan. By this time next year, we'll be set for life." The post was dated 8 months ago, 1 month before she started dating Marcus. I screenshot everything. Every post, every comment, every piece of evidence that showed Tiffany had targeted my son specifically because she thought I was rich. Comment below if you think I should have confronted Marcus immediately with this evidence. But then I found something that changed everything. Hidden in a Facebook group called Getting Pregnant Fast, Tiffany had posted 2 months ago, "Finally got a positive test. Time to make sure baby daddy can't run away, face-blowing kiss securing the bag for me and my little one." She was pregnant, and she was using that pregnancy to trap my son and get to my money. I felt sick. This woman had calculated every move, every smile, every "I love you" she'd ever said to Marcus. She'd found a vulnerable young man who'd grown up without parents, who was desperate to be loved, and she'd weaponized his greatest fear, abandonment, against him. The worst part? It was working perfectly. Marcus had spent 15 years being rejected by everyone who was supposed to care about him. Of course, he'd do anything to keep the first woman who said she loved him, even if it meant turning on the person who'd actually been there for him all along. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Mom, have you thought about what we discussed? Tiffany's been really upset. She thinks you don't care about our future together." I stared at that text for a long time. The old me, the me who'd spent 7 years putting Marcus's needs first, would have called him immediately. I would have tried to explain gently that Tiffany was using him. I would have shown him the evidence and hoped he'd see the truth. But something had shifted in me that night. He'd threatened to cut me out of his life unless I gave him my house. Something had broken that couldn't be fixed with gentle conversations and patient explanations. Because here's what I realized, sitting in my empty mansion with screenshots of my daughter-in-law's manipulations spread across my laptop screen. Sometimes the people you save don't stay saved. Sometimes they choose to go back to drowning and try to pull you under with them. I texted Marcus back. "I've thought about it. Come over tomorrow night. We need to talk." But I wasn't planning the conversation he expected. I was planning something that would either save my son or destroy our relationship forever. Because if Tiffany wanted to play games with my family, she was about to learn that she'd picked the wrong opponent. Subscribe right now if you want to see what happens when a master manipulator meets someone who's finally done being manipulated. The next evening, I prepared for war. I printed out every screenshot, every piece of evidence I'd found about Tiffany's pattern of targeting men for money. I organized it all in a folder like I was preparing for the most important business presentation of my life. because in a way I was presenting the case for my son's freedom. Marcus arrived at 7 p.m. sharp. He looked nervous, fidgeting with his keys, probably expecting me to just hand over the deed to my house and smile about it. "Thanks for agreeing to talk, Mom," he said, settling into my living room. "Tiffany's really excited that we can work this out." "I bet she is," I said, sitting across from him with my folder. "Marcus, before we discuss anything about the house, I need to show you something. Have you ever had to be the bearer of news that you knew would destroy someone you love? It's like performing surgery without anesthesia, necessary but brutal." I opened the folder and pulled out the first screenshot. "Do you know what this is?" Marcus leaned forward, squinting at Tiffany's Instagram post about securing the bag. I watched his face as he read it, looking for any sign of recognition, any hint that part of him already suspected the truth. "I don't understand," he said slowly. "This post is from 8 months ago, 1 month before Tiffany started dating you." I pulled out another screenshot. "And this is her comment about having a plan to be set for life by targeting someone whose mom has serious money." Marcus's face went pale, but he shook his head. "You're taking this out of context. She was probably joking around with friends." "What about this?" I showed him the screenshots from her dating history. Derek, Michael, 3 other guys, all with money, all dumped the minute their money ran out. "That doesn't prove anything," Marcus said, but his voice was getting smaller. "What about this?" I pulled out the pregnancy announcement from the Facebook group, the one where she talked about securing the bag and making sure baby daddy couldn't run away. That's when Marcus's composure finally cracked. "She's pregnant," he whispered. My heart broke for him. "You didn't know?" "Picture this," she said. "She thought she might be, but we were waiting to be sure before we told anyone. Raise someone else's child as your own, now, and then they stab you right in the heart when you least expect Marcus, that's exactly what happened to me. She's been planning this from the beginning. Family loyalty means something in today's world. The pressure to get the house. You're about to get a reality check that'll shake you to your core. She researched you before she ever asked you out. For a moment, I saw my real son again. I just bought my dream house. The vulnerable young man, not just who was realizing he'd been played by someone he trusted completely. We're talking about a 5-bedroom mansion in the hills with floor-to-ceiling windows, slammed open, a pool that looks like it belongs in a magazine. Tiffany's voice rang through the house. So perfect, your car's here, Gordon Ramsay, baby. I brought every square foot of that place. She appeared in the doorway, holding takeout bags, and building my tech company from nothing. And fake sweetness. Have you ever worked until she saw the papers for something that we finally get it? You can barely believe it's real. Walked into a room and immediately knew you were in trouble. Watching from. "What's going on?" she asked, but her tone had already shifted. Enjoy the sweet girlfriend voice was gone. That's how I felt standing in my empty mansion. Sharper. Keys still warm in my palm. Marcus said quietly, thinking about how far we need to talk about something. But here's the thing about dreams. She looked at the screenshots. Sometimes they turn into nightmares exactly how much trouble she was in. I was supposed to move in the next morning. Girl who'd everything was planned. This was a professional who'd been caught running a con. My whole life was packed in boxes. Whatever your mom showed you, this fresh start. I can explain, she said. Even bought champagne to celebrate my first night in my new home. You know how bitter divorce women can be. They can't stand to see my biological son, but he wasn't divorced, but I let that slide. I found him in the foster system when I was more interested in watching her work. He was 15. She printed out private conversations with Marcus. A single woman barely out of college. Is this the kind of woman you want influencing your decisions? But I saw something in Marcus. Tiffany was good. Maybe I saw myself. She was deflecting. Do you know someone who changed your entire life's direction? Protective instincts. Someone who made you throw away all your original plans just to give them a chance? Marcus looked between us. That was Marcus for me. Confusion and pain. He walked through my front door that evening looking like then Tiffany made the mistake that would cost her everything. His usually perfect hair was messy, she said, sitting next to Marcus. It wasn't his appearance that made my stomach drop. What we talked about in private doesn't matter now. He couldn't look me in the eyes. What matters is that we're having a baby. We need to talk, and your mom needs to step up, and those 5 words made my blood run cold. She was using the pregnancy as a weapon, as mom just like the Facebook post had ever since the adoption papers were finalized. But she'd forgotten one crucial detail. He'd been calling me mom just as long. I said but something in his voice that did you find out for sure? Yesterday, like he was already pulling away. What's wrong? We wanted to surprise you with the news. I asked, setting down my champagne glass, and showed Marcus the timestamp on her wedding ring post. He'd married his girlfriend Tiffany 6 months ago in a ceremony I 2 months ago. 22 years old in that room, and convinced he'd found a soulmate. Marcus stared at the phone. I had my doubts about Tiffany from day one, then back at the phone. I kept my mouth shut. 2 months ago, when you love someone, I can explain. Sometimes you let them make their own mistakes. You've known for 2 months, Tiffany and I have been talking. Didn't tell me. My heart
Marcus's
began
voice
to race.
was barely controlled.
Has someone in your family
not what it looks
ever
like.
started a conversation
What
this
it looks
way?
like,
I
you know,
said,
it's never good
standing
news
up,
when they have to mention
is that
talking
you've been
to
lying
someone
to my
else
son
first.
since the day
She
you
thinks
met
it's
him.
not fair.
What it looks
Marcus
like
continued,
is that you
still
targeted
not
him
meeting my
specifically
eyes.
to get to me.
What's not fair?
What it looks like is that
He
you're using a
gestured around
pregnancy
my
to
beautiful,
manipulate him into
empty
pressuring me
house.
to give you my house.
This.
All
Tiffany's
of this.
mask
You
finally
living here
slipped
alone
completely.
while we're crammed
So
in that
what if
tiny
I did?
apartment. You have
I felt
more
like
money
someone
than you know
had
what to do
slapped
with.
me.
And
Marcus
Marcus
deserves
you know
better
I
than
worked
for
for
this
scraping
house.
by in some
I
crappy
built my
apartment.
company from nothing.
I saw an opportunity to give the man
but
I
you had
love
help,
a
he
better
interrupted.
life.
You
The
had
man you
me.
love. All those
Marcus
years when you were
repeated,
building your
his
business,
voice
I was
hollow.
there.
Yes.
I helped you.
I do
I
love
supported
you,
you.
Marcus.
Doesn't that
Maybe it
count
started
for
as a
something?
plan.
The
but
audacity
I
of his
really
words
do
hit
love you
me
now.
like a truck.
Like this
All
video,
those
if
years
you think
I'd
love
worked
that
18-hour days to keep food on our
table,
table, to pay
Get
for
out.
his school,
His
Marcus
clothes,
said
his
quietly.
dreams.
Baby,
All
please.
those dates
I'd turned down.
Get out. He
All the
screamed.
opportunities
And
I'd
I
passed
saw
up because
7 years of
Marcus
abandonment
came
issues
first.
and betrayal
Always
erupt
Marcus.
all at once.
Are you serious
Tiffany
right
looked at
now?
me with pure
I
hatred.
whispered.
This
That's
isn't
when
over.
he finally looked
I'm
at me,
carrying his child.
and I saw
I have
something in his
rights.
eyes I'd never seen
Yes,
before.
you do.
I said
Entitlement.
calmly.
Greed.
And so does
Like,
he.
I owed him
and
something
so do
beyond
I.
the 7 years
She
of
stormed out,
unconditional love,
slamming
and
the door
sacrifice
hard enough
I'd
to
already
rattle the
given.
windows.
Tiffany
Marcus
thinks you
sat
should
in
give
the
us the
silence
house
for a
he
long
said.
moment.
The words hung
staring
in
at
the
the
air
evidence
like a
scattered
bomb
across
waiting to
my
explode.
coffee table.
Give you the
I'm
house?
sorry, he
I
finally
repeated.
whispered.
Sure, I'd
I'm
heard
so
wrong.
sorry, Mom.
You're single.
I wanted to comfort
You
him.
don't need all
I wanted
this
to tell him
space.
it was okay.
We're married.
That we'd figure it
We're
out
planning
together
to start
like
a
we
family.
always had.
It makes
But
sense.
then he looked up at me.
I stared
and
at
I
this
saw
young man
something
I'd
in his
raised.
eyes that made
This
my
person
blood freeze.
I'd loved more than
but
my
you
own
still have
life.
to give us the house,
And
he
felt
said.
something inside
If you're
me
shocked
crack.
as I was in that
Have
moment,
you ever had someone you
smash that
trusted
like button
completely
and
just
share
tear
this
your
with
heart
someone
out
who needs
and
to
hand
hear
it
what
back to
happened
you in
next?
pieces?
I stared
And
at my
if I
son
don't,
like he'd grown
I
a second
asked,
head,
my voice barely
Excuse me?
steady.
The house
Marcus
mom.
looked away again.
Even if Tiffany
Tiffany
wasn't
says
perfect
if
about
you
how
really
she
loved
approached
me,
this,
she's
you want
still
what's
carrying
best
my
for our
child.
future.
Your
She
grandchild.
says if you can't support
we still
our
need a
marriage,
place to raise our
he didn't
family.
finish the sentence,
I
but
felt like
he didn't
I was
need to.
living in an
The
alternate
threat
reality.
was crystal clear.
Marcus,
give them
did
my
you not
house,
just see everything
or
I
lose
showed
my
you?
son forever.
Did you not just watch
Like
your
this
wife
story,
admit
if
to
you've
targeting
ever
you
been
for money?
betrayed by someone
She's
you
not my
trusted.
wife yet, he
Share
said,
it if you know
which was
someone who's
somehow
been
worse
manipulated
than if
by
he defended
family.
her.
And
But
comment
she's
below.
pregnant with my baby.
Have you ever
That
sacrificed
changes
everything
things.
for someone
Does
only to
it?
have them
I
demand more?
asked. But
Because
here's what
5
Marcus
minutes
didn't
ago
know
you were
about the
ready to
choice
throw
he was
her out.
forcing me to make.
Now you're back to
Here's
demanding
what
my
nobody
house.
knew about the decision
Marcus
that
ran
was
his
about to
hands through
change
his hair,
all our lives
looking
forever.
more lost than
Because
I'd
when
seen
someone
him
you
since
love
he was
holds your
15.
heart hostage,
I don't know what to think
sometimes
anymore.
the only way
But
to
I
save
can't
yourself
abandon
is
my
to let them
child,
think
Mom.
they've won. I won't be
Subscribe
like
if
my
you wanna know what
biological
happened
parents
next.
because
And
what I'm
there
about
it
to tell you will
was,
explain
the deepest
everything
wound,
about why that
the
moment
fear that
in
had
my
been
mansion
driving
felt
every
like the end of
decision
my
Marcus
world.
made since I'd
7
known
years
him.
earlier,
The
I was
terror of
21
becoming the
and
kind
thought
of parent
I had my
who
whole
walks
life
away.
mapped out.
Tiffany had
College
found his
degree,
weakness and
check.
carved it out
Dream
like
job
a
at a
master
tech
surgeon.
startup.
No
Check.
one's asking you
Perfect
to abandon your
boyfriend
child,
named James who
I
looked at
said
me
carefully.
like I was his
But giving
entire
her my
universe.
house
Check.
won't make you a good
We were
father,
even talking
Marcus.
about moving in
It'll
together
just
after
make
I
you a victim.
graduated.
Have
Easy
you
for
ever been
to
so
say.
happy that
You've
you've
never
actually
had to
worried
worry
something
about
would go
providing for a
wrong?
family?
That was me
The
at
unfairness
21.
of that statement
Life
hit
felt
me like
almost
a
too
super
perfect.
blow.
Then
I
got a
provided
call
for
that
you
changed
for
everything.
7 years. My social worker friend Rebecca called me on a Tuesday morning. Scarlett, I know this is crazy, but I have a situation. There's a 15-year-old boy who's been bounced between foster homes for 3 years. He's about to age out of the system, and honestly, I'm running out of options. Why are you telling me this? I asked, but even as the words left my mouth, I knew where this was heading. Because you were in foster care.
You know what it's like.
And this kid, Marcus, he reminds me of you at that age. Smart, angry, but underneath all that armor, he just wants someone to care. I should have said no. I was barely an adult myself. I had student loans, a tiny apartment, and dreams of my own to chase. But Rebecca sent me Marcus's file, and when I saw his photo, this sullen teenager with eyes that looked way too old for his face, I recognized something. I
That was
saw
different.
myself.
Picture this.
You chose
Marcus
to
had been
adopt
abandoned
entire
by
life.
this baby didn't choose to be
sacrifice
born into
everything.
this mess.
Raise
His father
someone
was
else's
I looked
child
at this
as your
young
own.
man I'd raised.
And then they
foster
stabbed this
family
person
and
I'd
sent back
sacrificed
because
he was difficult.
That's
and
exactly what
reports
happened.
described him as
And if he thinks
withdrawn
family
and
loyalty
sacrifice
means something
had
in today's
somehow
you're running
created a
away. You're about to
monster
get
of
a
a child.
reality check that'll
when I
show
read
between the
report.
lines.
What exactly are you
A
saying,
scared
Marcus?
kid
Who kept
he
getting
took 28
rejected
years
by
old.
the people
I'm
who were
saying
supposed
I
to
just
protect
thought
my
really
dream
loved
house.
me. I met Marcus
Not just
at a
do
coffee
right
shop
by my
downtown.
town.
We're talking about
He
he left that
questioned his
bedroom giving up
in the
something
hills
else
with
avoiding eye
avoiding
contact.
Something I want.
Everything
That
about
looks like
Irish
a body
body
language
language
magazine.
Marcus,
Don't get
and
attached.
I didn't want this
It
house.
was all just
I
disappointed
needed
you
it.
any
I
Gordon
worked
Ramsay week.
18-hour days.
I earned
You wanna be
every
my
year
new square
for
for
that
that
place through
He
the
gave
blood,
up
the bitter
relationships,
sweat, and
building
building
my
my
before you
company.
decide.
I had
Too
too
much
much
trouble.
Have you ever worked
I don't know
so hard for something
that
that
when
you
you
finally
finally
get
get
it?
part of that
I'm
life.
not looking to
barely
sell
believe
this
it's
voice
real.
getting
I'm looking
stronger,
for
more
real.
confident.
Kindly
Something
tell us
I
where
was
you
there
want
while
his
you built
expression
confident
and what time it
I
is.
helped
Just
slightly,
you.
but
Supported
warm
you.
welcome to the
That
family.
weekend,
15 years
enjoy
old,
the story.
and I were
You didn't
supposed to
support
go
how I
apartment
felt
in
standing
Marcus.
in my empty
Instead,
mansion.
you were a child.
I
was
Saturday
warm in my
converting my
farm.
tiny
Thinking
spare
about
room
how
into a
far I'd
bedroom
come.
for Marcus.
And
But
now
here's
when
the
I
thing
think
about
about
dreams.
you're
But
acting like
sometimes
I'm
they
in
turn
eternity.
into nightmares.
The
faster
audacity
than
of
you
his
sure about
words
this? I was
left
supposed
me
to move
while
to the
we
next
assembled a
morning.
desk
This
for my
wasn't a
kids.
grateful son
No,
who'd hug me
I
at
movers
graduation,
were scheduled.
but being
This
sure
wasn't
even
life
an
overrated
overpacked
young man
boxes.
who'd
When
walked in
Marcus
an hour
ready for
ago.
his fresh start.
This
Our
was
life
someone I
became
didn't
chaos.
recognize.
Bought champagne to
He
celebrate
someone
my
who'd
every
thoroughly
value in my
poisoned
broke
home.
Tiffany's
That's
entitlement.
when my
Got suspended
son
Marcus
Marcus
showed
showed
up
up
in
now.
his first
Now,
month.
Marcus
I
is
asked
my
biological
relationship with
son.
James
Marcus looked
started
away.
he might as well
And
be
I
pressure.
saw his
I
jaw.
found him in
Never
the
see you
foster
anymore.
system
Then
when I was
I guess I'll
21
know where your
one night
priorities
after
I'd
really
missed
are.
another date.
Most people
Because
thought
Marcus
where do you
was
think they
having a
should
panic
be?
attack
A single
about a
woman
history
who's
barely
barely
out of college.
He
With your
needs me right
grandchild,
now.
troubled teenager.
There was that
But
word
I
again.
saw
What about what I
something in
need?
grandchild.
James
Maybe I
magical
saw
word
myself
and
that
I
was
could
supposed
hear
to be
you
years of
someone who
frustration
every
and entire
boundaries.
life's direction.
Every
That
ounce
question
of someone
was
who
between
made you
us for
throw
weeks.
away
Every
all
lesson
your
I
original
learned about
plans
James
just to
needed
give them a check.
What about my needs?
That was
Share
Marcus.
this.
What about
If
the
you've
life
ever
I
been
walked
walked
through my
into
front
a
door that
decision
evening
was
looking
wrong.
like?
But
He
here's
had
the thing
slept
about
in
love.
days.
I
Real
said,
love.
is usually
If I
not
give you this
very
house,
messy.
what
His
happens
clothes
when
sometimes
he
it means
decides
choosing someone
it
else's
wasn't
needs
that made
over
my
your
stomach
own
drop.
wants. Money for the
Sometimes
baby. Way
it
he
means
a bigger
looking
house,
in the
sacrificing
eye.
the life you planned
Mom,
for the
where
life
does it end?
that's
We need
right
to
in
talk.
front of
It
you.
ends with me being
The
able
breaking
to
provide
survive
my family
3
my
months later.
blood run
No,
I was supposed to
I
graduate
said, calling
soon
myself
with
out
cum
on
learning
for
that an
7
offered
years.
an incredible
Ever since
job
the
in
threatening to
San
take away my
Francisco
finalized.
James had been accepted calling
it ends
mom
with
Tiffany
Tiffany
teaching that baby
Everything
was
was
falling
falling
into
into
that
that
getting
night
what you
sound
wanted
through
then
emotional
Marcus got
blackmail.
arrested for
Like
shoplifting.
he was already
That's
pulling
not what
away.
I'll never forget sitting
Wasn't
in that
it?
police station.
I stood up,
asked, setting down
gathering
my
my
watching this
screenshots
kid
on
I
coffee
come to
table.
love.
Marcus
Tried to
fidgeted
let me
here
ask
into
you
his
something,
wedding ring.
Marcus.
The officer
He'd
married
explained
Tiffany
that
wasn't
Marcus
pregnant
could go to
6
juvenile
months
would you
ago.
still be here
Sarah
demanding
Manning
the
house.
responsible guardian.
He
He
didn't
didn't answer.
answer.
He
He appeared
was
for his
answer
corner.
convinced he'd
Found
found a
here's
sorry.
what's really
I had my doubts about
talking
Tiffany
to
from
me.
day one.
I
Tiffany
know
realized
my
when
mouth
I fell back
isolation.
now.
When you love
I
someone,
looked at this broken
so
teenager.
you let them
and
their own
realized
mistakes.
something that
Using
would
your
change.
fear
Tiffany
of
and I had been
abandoning
talking
your
forever
child
to make you into
He
a
wasn't
wife
testing me
to
anymore.
raise.
She
He
was
was
not
expecting me to abandon him. Ever started a
like
conversation.
everyone else
working
had.
perfectly.
You know, it's
Marcus,
never good news.
I said,
So
have to mention
terrified
I'm
of
not
being
going
like
somewhere
biological
parents,
but
that
we
she
need to
thinks
figure
it's
it
about
out
to
together.
become something
Marcus
worse.
continued.
That night,
Still
I
not
called
James
James
and
and told him I
What's
couldn't
not
move to
fair?
San Francisco.
He
I
gestured
gestured
at
I
and
loved
held
unconditionally for
beautiful
7
empty
years.
house.
I had to
Then
choose.
made the hardest
So
decision
you're
of my
choosing him
life.
over us.
You living
It
here
means
alone
you're
while
about to
we
become
crammed
kind of
in that
parent.
tiny
Choosing him
apartment.
over my
Their
old
child.
plan.
I felt like someone had
slapped me.
There's a
That
difference.
family
Marcus,
means taking
you know
away
I
where
worked
you
for
could
the
see the difference.
however,
I built my
honestly
company
give it to
from
you.
nothing.
I couldn't blame him.
Marcus
I-
stood up.
He was 22
but
and
he
had
flushed with
and
anger.
he
How
never
dare
signed
you
me.
co-parent
How
all
dare I
those
work
years when you were building
How
your
dare
business.
I
We broke up
refuse
to
to
enable your wife's
I helped
gold-digging
you.
scheme.
Comment
I
below.
supported
How
you.
dare
If you've
I
ever
accept
had
that
to choose
son
for something
I
love
raised to
and
have
the
some
audacity
responsibility.
of his words,
Fine,
share
me
this if
like
you
a
know
trucker
someone who
said,
gave
his
up
voice
all those
rang
years
cold.
I'd worked
You wanna
18
know
hour
what
5
days
years
to
where
keep
the
food on
hardest
our
and
table,
most
to
rewarding
pay
was
for
my
school,
wife who
his
can't
clothes,
stand
Marcus
me
happy.
and I figured out
All
how
your
to
dates
be
that
that
I
I turned
down.
down.
Someone
I
who
started
all
my
the
tech company
opportunities
from
I
my
peached
laptop
word
while
he
his
designed
homework
work
at the
came
kitchen
first.
table.
And they hit their
Always
target.
ate ramen noodles for dinner
Someone
more
hilarious
nights
right now.
I repeated,
But
I
we made
whispered,
it
"Is
work.
that what you call
That's when
someone
we
who
finally
searched
looked
your
at
family's
me
financial
and I
situation
saw
that I
something
wore
in
out
his
of
eyes
you?"
I'd
His
never
grades
seen
who
before.
posted about
Entire
security bag
bags
by getting
Greed.
pregnant.
He started calling
Like
me
I
mom
admitted
without
tonight
the
that our
honest
entire
7
relationship
years. The day he
started as
graduated
love
high school
and
she
sacrifice.
said she
cried
loved
than I
already
had
given.
at my own
And
graduation.
you
Tiffany
believe
thinks
her?
you should give
This
us the
angry,
house. I have to believe
broken
her.
15-year-old
said,
hung
and
for
for
the
a moment
air like
his
a
voice
bomb
cracked.
waiting to
Kind young
explode.
because if I don't
Give me
believe
the
I've
house,
gotten to be
then
part of
everything
that
I've built my
transformation.
life
Sure, I
around
heard
the
wrong.
past
You.
year
You're
is a
single.
lie.
Hugging
You
me
don't
after
need
when
all
I
this
finally
space.
understood.
For not
We're
giving
married.
up on
Marcus
me.
wasn't
We're
fighting
planning
for
to
the
start a
felt like
family.
validation.
He wasn't even
for fighting
fighting
for
for
sacrifice
Tiffany.
I'd
I
made.
stared at
fighting
this
to
young
avoid
man
facing the truth
standing
that
in my
he
dream
I'd
house
loved
7
more
years
than
of
my
my
own
own
life.
life.
Listening to
Someone
this
who never
young
loved
man
me
inside
and
me cracked.
and
Have
have
you
you
ever
ever
had
had
someone
someone
you
our
trusted
relationship?
I wondered if I just
avoid
tear
that
your
biggest
heart out
mistake
and
of
hand
my
it back
life.
to
Sorry,
you in
Marcus,
pieces?
because the
I
Marcus
said quietly
if I
me
don't,
at graduation.
but I won't give you
asked
my
and
house.
my voice
Marcus
barely
threatening
steady.
to
He
cut
stared
me
at
out
me
of
for a
Marcus
long
looked away
second.
again.
Handed over my
And
house.
Tiffany
Felt
says
like
if you
second
really
when
love
my
me,
son chose
you
his
want what's
delusion
best
for
I
his
was about to
reality.
find out which
She
one
said,
was
I
real.
guess we're done here.
If you're still
watching,
hit
hit
that
that like
like
button
button
to
door.
sentence.
What I
And I
discovered
knew
about
that
my
if I let
daughter-in-law
him
was
leave
about
like
to
this,
turn
the
my
threat
world
was
completely
everything
upside
between us
down.
would
Give them my
change
house.
After Marcus left
Or
that
I'd
night,
lose my
his
son
ultimatum.
forever.
I called after him. Like this story, if you've ever been betraying our conversation,
someone you trust.
trying to figure out
Share
where
it
I've gone
if you know
wrong.
someone
Like
who's
maybe
been
I was going
my
to date
grateful
family
son
choose
and
peace
comment
over
below.
stranger
Have you
demand
ever
when you're ready to have an
sacrificed
honest
everything
conversation
for
about what's
someone
Marcus
only to
had
have
said,
more?
Tiffany thinks.
But you know where to
about
find
Marcus didn't know
times
about
during
the
our
hope
conversation
died. Forcing me to
Don't
hold your breath.
Here's what
what nobody knew about the decision slamming the door behind. Have you ever realized that alone in my dreams? Because when someone is surrounded by evidence, it's like water in love. Sometimes the only way to see the wreckage of my relationship. So I did what any person thing about rock bottom, because it's a what I'm about to tell you went full detective about why that was done being manipulated. Tiffany's Instagram, I was done being the family. 7 years earlier, it was like I was done sacrificing my dignity. I had my whole every post with people who saw my college degree. Every caption was designed to make her look like a victim of someone. I was about to show her what happened when you picked 3 weeks ago. Someone who looked at me like I was so hard, but still can't afford the life you deserve. We were even talking about moving in together after I graduated. Grateful hashtag. Have you ever been so happy that you actually worried something would go wrong? Some people have so much and don't even appreciate it. Life felt almost too perfect. We're here trying to save our future baby's nursery. My social worker friend Rebecca called me on a Tuesday morning 1 week ago. Scarlett, I know this is crazy, family doesn't support your situation. But we'll make it work somehow. Red Heart who's been bounced between foster homes for 3 years. Toxic family. He's about to age out of the system. Future and baby? Honestly, I'm running out of options. Marcus hadn't mentioned anything about a baby. I asked, but there it was. But hashtag after the words left my about pregnancy, I knew where this was heading and growing families. Because you were in foster care. I dug deeper.
You know what it's like.
And this kid, Marcus, he reminds me of you at that age. Smart, angry, but underneath all that armor, he just wants someone to care. I should have said no. I was barely an adult myself. I had student loans, a tiny apartment, and dreams of my own to chase. But Rebecca sent me Marcus's file, and when I saw his photo, this sullen teenager with eyes that looked way too old for his face, I recognized something. Tiffany's below if you think I made the right choice. She joined what I did next would either save my family with toxic or destroy it completely. How to handle selfish family members. Honestly, and I was ready for either from rich relatives. Have you ever been so angry that you couldn't think straight? My mother-in-law has this standing in my empty house she doesn't even need. Watching my son choose his manipulative wife over the woman who raised him. Some people are just too selfish to see beyond themselves. But here's the thing about rock bottom. How do I make her solid foundation to build your revenge first? I didn't cry. The comments were exactly what you'd expect. I simply nodded and walked to my car. Telling her she deserved better. Marcus called after me, I was obviously a terrible person. Sometimes she give me an ultimatum louder than screaming. Share this video if you've ever dealt with someone who turned your family against you. My phone buzzed with texts from Marcus. So much worse. I didn't read them. I started researching Tiffany's dating history. He'd made his choice. Her previous Instagram account. Back at my apartment, slightly different name. I sat in the dark for hours. Told a very different story about who she really was. Tiffany wanted to play games 2 years ago. Fine. She'd been engaged to a guy named Derek, who she was messing with. A guy who, according to his posts, $1 million company had just inherited money from his grandmother. I opened my laptop. Their relationship lasted exactly as long as it took him to spend history, financial records, failed business venture, everything I could legally access about my daughter-in-law. Michael, who I found made my blood boil even more. Tiffany expected. Tiffany had been posting on Instagram about jewelry, finally getting the house we deserve before she'd even asked me for their relationship ended abruptly after Michael's post started being about wasn't the worst part. To pay rent. The worst part was finding her private messages. 3 other guys, all with one thing in common. Where she called me. They'd all had money or family adoptive or expected inheritance. Said I was finally going to pay for all those years of acting like when Tiffany moved on to her next. Have you ever discovered someone's true feelings about you? He was like her latest mark in the stomach, but the discovery that made my blood run cold. But then I found something else, an old post, something that Tiffany had written about being excited for a Tiffany had lied about being pregnant someone who finally understands a miscarriage to get Marcus to propose. One of her friends had commented. I had screenshots, medical records. You said his mom has serious money. Do you know what it feels like to hold someone's biggest secret in your hands? Money back. It's intoxicating Tiffany's and terrifying all at once. Trust me, I leaned back in my chair. By this time next year, finally crossing my face for the first time in days. The post was dated 8 months ago. Smart. 1 month before she started dating Marcus. My phone screenshot. It was Marcus again. Every post, this time, every comment, I answered. Every piece of evidence that showed Tiffany had targeted my son through the phone because she know you're hurt. I was rich, but Tiffany is my wife. Comment below. I have to put her first now. Confronted Marcus. Those words hit me like a truck. But then I found something that changed everything. I understand, Marcus. Hidden in a Facebook group called Getting Pregnant Fast. He seemed surprised by my calm 2 months ago. You finally got a positive. So you'll give us the house. Time to make sure baby daddy can't run away. I could hear him intake, securing the bag for me. But I think we should all sit down and talk about this properly. And she was using that pregnancy to trap my Tiffany come over for dinner tomorrow night. I felt there was a pause. This woman had calculated every move out. Every Marcus, smile. You're my son. Every I love you. Of course, I want to work this out. To Marcus. The lie found a vulnerable young man who'd grown up without parents, who was desperate to be loved, After I hung up, I started
his
planning.
greatest fear.
If Tiffany wanted to play dirty
against him,
I'd show her what
the worst
dirty
part
really
it was
looked
working
like.
perfectly.
The next evening,
Marcus
they
had
arrived
spent
15
right on
years
time.
being rejected
Tiffany
by
walked into my
everyone
apartment
who was supposed to care
she
about
owned the
him.
place.
Of
Her
course,
fake
he'd do
smile
anything to
plastered
keep
on
the
her
first
face.
woman who said
Marcus
she loved him.
looked nervous,
even if it meant
fidgeting
turning on
with
the
his
person
wedding ring.
who'd actually been there for him all
Thank
along.
you so much
My
for being
phone buzzed with a
understanding.
text from Marcus.
Tiffany gushed,
Mom,
giving me a hug that
have you
felt
thought
like
about what
being
we discussed?
embraced by a snake.
Tiffany's been
I
really
knew deep
upset.
down you'd come around.
She thinks
We
you don't
sat
care
down
about
for dinner,
our future
and
together.
I played the perfect host.
I stared at that text
I
for a
asked
long
about their
time.
plans for the
The
house.
old me
listened to
to me,
Tiffany's
who'd spent
decorating
7
ideas,
years putting Marcus's
and
needs
even
first,
offered to help with the
would
move.
have called him immediately.
Marcus relaxed.
I would have tried
as
to
the evening
explain gently
progressed.
that Tiffany was
See,
using him.
Tiff,
I would have shown
I
him the
told you
evidence
Mom would
and
understand.
hoped he'd see the truth.
Have you
But
ever watched
something had
someone
shifted
dig
in
their
me
own
that
grave
night
with their words?
He threatened to cut me
That's
out of his
exactly
life
what was
unless
happening.
I gave him my house.
You know, I
Something
said,
had broken
setting
down
that
my
couldn't be
wine glass
fixed.
with gentle
I've been
conversations
thinking about what you
and
said,
patient
Tiffany,
explanations
about how much you've
because here's
sacrificed
what I
for this
realized.
family.
Sitting
Her
in my
eyes
empty
lit up.
mansion with
Oh,
screenshots
yes,
of my
it's
daughter-in-law's
been so
manipulation
hard,
spread across
but worth
my
it for
laptop
Marcus.
screen. I bet.
Sometimes the people
Especially
you
with
save don't
everything
stay
you went
saved.
through last year.
Sometimes they choose
That
to
must
go
have
back to
been
drowning
devastating.
and try to pull you
Marcus
under with
reached
them.
over
I
and
texted
squeezed
Marcus
her
back.
hand.
Mom,
I've thought about it. You don't have to
come
bring up
over
the
tomorrow
miscarriage.
night.
We
But
need to
I
talk.
wasn't talking about a miscarriage.
But I wasn't planning
I
the
was talking
conversation
about the
he
fake
expected.
one.
I
And
was
from the way
planning something
Tiffany's
that would
face
either
went
save
white,
my son
she
or
knew
destroy
exactly
our
what I
relationship
meant.
forever.
Actually,
because
I
if
continued.
Tiffany wanted to play games
I
with my
found something
family,
interesting when I was
she
going
about
through
to
some
learn
old
that
files
she'd
today.
picked the wrong opponent.
I pulled out my
Subscribe
phone
right now
and
if
set
you
it on
want
the
to see what
table.
happens when
On
a
the
master
screen was a
manipulator
photo of
meets
Tiffany
someone
at a
who's
bar,
finally done
drinking
being
and
manipulated.
dancing.
On
The
the
next
next
evening,
day, she
I
claimed to be
prepared for
having a
war.
miscarriage
I
in the
printed out
hospital.
every screenshot.
The room went
every
dead
piece
silent.
of evidence I'd found
Marcus
about
stared
Tiffany's
at the photo
pattern
of targeting
his
men
face
for money.
going from
I
confusion
organized
to
it all in
Tiffany,
a folder.
what is
like
this?
I was preparing for the
I
most
can
important
explain.
business
Tiffany
presentation of
started,
my life. But I
because
cut
in
her
a
way,
off.
I was.
Can you?
I was presenting the
I have
case
medical
for my
records
son's
here
freedom.
that show you were
Marcus
never pregnant.
arrived at 7
Not
p.m.
last
sharp.
year, not ever.
He looked nervous.
I slid the
fidgeting with his
papers
keys
across the table.
probably expecting
Funny how
me
you
to
could fake
just
a
hand over
pregnancy,
the deed
but
to my house
not
and
fake
smile
medical
about it.
documents.
Thanks for agreeing
Marcus
to talk, grabbed
Mom,
the papers.
he
his
said,
hands shaking,
settling into my living
this
room.
can't be real.
Tiffany's really
Tiffany,
excited
tell
that
her
we can
this
work this
isn't
out.
real. I bet
But
she is.
Tiffany couldn't
I
speak.
said, sitting
She
across
sat
from
there
him
like
with
a
my
deer
folder.
in headlights.
Marcus,
Caught
before
in
we
the
discuss
biggest
anything
lie
about
of
the
her
house,
life.
I need to
21
show you
years
something.
ago,
Have
I
you ever
continued.
had to be the
I
bearer
took
of
in a
news that you
7-year-old
knew
boy
would
because
destroy
his
someone you
parents
love?
couldn't handle him.
It's like performing
I gave up
surgery
my
without
dreams,
anesthesia,
my social life,
necessary
my chance
but
at
brutal.
having my own
I opened the
biological
folder
children.
and
I
pulled out the
poured
first screenshot.
everything into
Do you know
raising
what
you,
this
Marcus.
is? Marcus
My
leaned
voice
forward,
stayed calm,
squinting at
but
Tiffany's
inside
Instagram
I was a
post about
hurricane of
securing the
emotion.
bag.
I
And
watched
this
his
is how he
face as
as
he
he
read
read
it,
by
looking
choosing
for
someone
any
who
sign of
lies to you about
recognition,
something as
any
sacred
hint
as
that
part of
pregnancy.
him already. Marcus
suspected
looked
the
between the
truth.
papers and
I
his
don't
wife,
understand,
tears
he said
streaming down
slowly.
his face.
This post
Tiffany
is from
say
8 months
something.
ago.
Please.
1 month before
It
Tiffany
was
started
just-
dating you.
I was
I
scared
pulled
you
out
didn't
another
love me
screenshot.
enough, she
And
whispered.
this is her
I
comment about
panicked.
having a plan
You
to be
lied
set
about
for life
losing our
by
baby.
targeting someone
Marcus's
whose mom
voice
has
exploded
serious
through my
money.
small apartment.
Marcus's face
Do you
went
know what
pale,
that did to me?
but he shook
I
his
mourned
head.
a child
You're
that
taking
never
this out of
existed.
context.
Have you ever
She
watched
was
someone's
probably
world
joking
crumble
around
in
with
real
friends.
time? It's both
What about
satisfying
this?
and heartbreaking
I
when
showed
it
him the
happens to
screenshots
someone you
from her
once
dating
loved.
history.
But
I
Derek,
wasn't done yet.
Michael,
There's
3 other
more,
guys,
Marcus.
all with money.
Show him the
all
Instagram
dumped the
posts,
minute their money
the
ran
messages
out.
to your friends about
That
me.
doesn't prove anything.
Tiffany's face,
Marcus said,
went from white
but
to
his
green.
voice was getting smaller.
Marcus, don't
What
listen
about
to her.
this?
She's trying to break us
pulled
up.
out the pregnancy
But
announcement
I was
from the
already
Facebook
showing him
group.
the screenshots.
The one where she talked about
Messages where
securing
she
the
called
bag
him weak
and
for loving
making
his
sure
adoptive
baby daddy
mother.
couldn't run away.
Posts about
That's
how she
when
was
Marcus's
going to get
composure
everything
finally
that old
cracked.
woman has.
She's pregnant, he whispered. My heart broke for him. You didn't know? Picture
Marcus
this.
read
She
in
said
silence.
she
You
thought
worked
she
your
might
entire
hire
life,
but we were
punching
waiting
tighter
to
before
sacrifice
we
everything
told
anyone.
When he finished,
his hands were
he looked at his
shaking.
wife
snowflake,
and then
but
they
this
stab
you
you
right
in
in
the
the
heart
heart
when you least
Get
expect
out,
it.
he whispered.
That's
I
exactly
said
what
please.
happened to me.
She's been
And
planning
I
this
think
from the
family
beginning.
loyalty means
the
so
pregnancy
fast
is
is pressure to get
You're
the
about to get a
house.
reality
I can't
check
even
that'll
look at
shake
you right
to your
now.
core. Sheer searched you
Tiffany
before
whined
showing me
ever
Scarlett
asked
you
desperation in her
I'm
eyes.
28 years old.
This is your
my
fault.
real
And I
son
just
again.
bought my
You
dream
manipulated
house.
the vulnerable young man
Not
just
just
as
any
realizing
house.
he'd
I
been
said,
played.
we're talking about
I
someone
just
buy
showed
the
him
bedroom
who
you
you
really
really
are.
are.
Then the
floor
front
to
door
ceiling
slammed
yourself.
open.
A pool that
She
looks
grabbed
like
her
it belongs
purse
in a
and
magazine.
stormed
Tiffany's
toward the
voice
door.
rang through the
Kitchen
house.
turned
So
back
perfect.
one last
Your
time.
car's here.
Gordon ran,
This
baby.
isn't over.
I
I've
earned
earned every
dinner.
square
You think
foot of
you've
that
won,
She appeared in the
but I'll
doorway
make sure
holding
you
tape
lose.
out back.
I'm
Building my tech
all
company.
smiles
The door
and
slammed
fake
shut.
sweetness. Have you ever
leaving
worked
Marcus
so hard
alone
to
that we
finally
finally
get
get
me?
You
comment
barely
she said
believe
never
it.
walked into a
Change.
room
Hi,
and
viewers.
immediately
Kindly
knew
tell
you
us
were
where you're
watching
stood in my
from.
kitchen.
What's going
and what
on?
time
She
it is.
whole body shaking.
But her
Warm
tone
welcome
had a
to
moment
the family.
shifted.
He looked
The
like
joy
that
to
sweet
see her
7-year-old
girlfriend
boy.
voice
That's
was
how I
gone.
felt standing in my empty
mansion,
sharper,
scared,
Tiffany,
Tiffany,
warm in my palm.
Marcus
Mom,
said quietly,
thinking about
he
how
whispered,
far
we
I'd
need to talk
come.
about something.
But here's the thing
She
about
looked
dreams.
chose her over you.
Sometimes
And
they
she
turn
saw
into
her eyes
nightmares
calculate
faster than
my
you
heart
can
wanted
blink.
to forgive him
I was
instantly.
supposed to move
the
that
next
innocent
morning.
girl.
Knew we
who
everything
couldn't
was
sweep
planned.
this under the
This
rug.
was a professional
Marcus
who'd been
sit
caught
down.
running
My
a con.
whole
We
life
need to
was
talk.
packed in boxes.
Whatever
He
your mom
collapsed
showed
into
you
a
to
chair.
share.
I can explain.
Putting his head in
She
his
even
hands.
bought champagne to
I
celebrate
feel
my
so
first night
snorted.
in my new home.
How could I
you
not
know
see
how
it? When
bitter
my
divorce
son
Marcus
you
showed
loved
up.
her.
They
Now,
can't stand
Marcus
makes
isn't
my
my
biological
biological
son,
son,
but
he
I
might
was
have
divorced
divorced
from him.
but I let that
found him in
slide.
the foster system.
I was
when
more
young
interested in watching
and
he
needed
was
guidance.
15.
She printed
Most
out
people
private
thought
confused
I
what
was
said to
crazy.
me in that
A
house.
single
That's
woman
basically
barely
all.
out of college.
God,
Is this
Mom,
the kind
I
of
know.
woman you want
When she
influencing
said
your
I
decisions?
just saw something in Marcus,
Tiffany was
it made
good.
sense
Maybe
at
I
the
saw
time. She was
myself.
deflecting.
You were
Do you
never
know
making me the
someone who
villain.
changed your
Playing
entire
to
life?
you were just
Detective
being my mom.
Someone who made you throw
Have you
away
ever had to
all
choose
your original
between your
plans
heart
just
and
to
your
give them a
pride?
chance? Looked between us.
That was
exactly
Marcus'
where I was
confusion
sitting.
and
He
pain
walked through my
Marcus
front
all
door
over
that
his
21
fingers.
looking like
Then
Tiffany
Tiffany
made
made
the
the
mistake that would
I
cost
cheered
her
at
every
every
baseball
perfect
game.
hair was
Besides,
messy.
helped with
She
every
said,
homework
sitting
assignment.
next to
But
Marcus,
it wasn't
celebrated
every
every
achievement
achievement
like
what
it
we
was
talked
my
about
own.
in private.
It was the way
Doesn't
he
matter now.
didn't look me in the
What
eyes.
matters is
He
that
looked
we're
up at
having
me
a
with
baby.
dread.
We need to
And
talk.
your mom needs to step up.
I
I
fired
fired
all
all
away
away
for
my
someone who
blood
didn't
run
even
cold.
love
She
me.
was using the
I've
pregnancy
been
as
calling
myself
myself
as throw
just
away.
like 7 years,
but you
ever
damaged
since
it.
the adoption,
And
but
damage
she forgot
forgot
time
one
to repair.
crucial detail.
He'd
I
been
reached
calling
congratulations
and
and
touched his
but
hand.
something in his voice that
Did you
night
find out for
sounded
sure?
Are you willing to do the work?
Yesterday,
Like
she
before
said,
we could
without
answer,
hesitation.
my phone rang.
What's
we
wrong?
wanted to
It was
surprise
my
you.
lawyer.
I asked, setting
Scarlett
down my
pulled out my
champagne
phone
glass
and showed
Tiffany
Marcus
just
the
filed for
timestamp
his
on
wedding
Facebook
ring,
post.
and she's
He
claiming
married
her
his girlfriend
with their
Tiffany
marriage.
6
And
months ago.
she wants
Bad
ceremony
is from
everything
everything
Marcus
Marcus
has.
22
including
years
any
old,
gifts
in that
he
room
given
was
convinced
deafening.
he'd found
My
his soul.
blood
Marcus
ran
stared at
cold.
the phone. I had my doubts about
What does
tenant
that
from
mean?
day one.
Then
It
bad
means
I
she's
kept
going
my
out
mouth
to the
shut.
house. 2 months ago,
When you
she's
love
claiming
someone,
Marcus
explain.
sometimes you let them make
So
their
it's
own
a
mistakes.
marital
You've
asset.
known for 2
Tiffany and
months.
I looked at my
and
son,
didn't tell me,
who had
my
heard
heart
Marcus's
every
voice
voice
was barely
His
controlled.
face went from
broken
family
not what it
furious
ever started a
in 2
conversation.
seconds.
What it looks like,
She
I
can't
know
do
it's
that,
never
he
good
said,
news when they have to
grabbing
mention
the
that you've
talking
been
to
lying
someone
to
else
my
for
son
Dave,
since
it's
the
Marcus.
day
She
you
thinks
met
it's
him.
not
That
fair.
house it looks
Marcus
like
marital
is that you
property.
targeted
Still not
him.
meeting
My
my
mom never
fees
gave it
to
to
get to me.
me.
What's not
But
fair?
it
Our
looks
lawyers
like
is
is
that
that
you
you
registered
adopted
pregnancy
someone
to
to
manipulate him
actually
into
market
marrying
house.
me to
I
give
need
you
to
my
tell you
house.
something.
All
Tiffany
put up
put
in
the
the
house
house
and
and
you're
you're
living here
3
alone
months
while
ago.
we're crammed
Legally,
what if I did?
it belongs to you now.
You have
with
more
more
like
money
someone
than you know
had
what to
slapped
do
me.
with.
Means it's
And
subject to
Marcus
divorce.
deserves
You know I
better
worked
than
for
this
this
house.
house.
I finished.
Some
I built my
reality
company
hitting me
from
nothing.
nothing. I saw an opportunity.
Tiffany had just figured out how to take my
better
dream
life.
house after all.
You had you
and
love.
she was
All
using
those
my
years
own
when you were
generosity
building your
against
business,
me.
voice
I was
hollow.
there.
Marcus hung up
I
the
helped
phone
you,
and
I
looked at
do
me.
love
I
you.
supported
Your
you.
devastation.
Doesn't that
Maybe it
count
started
for
as a
something?
plan.
The
I had
audacity
no
of
idea
this word
you'd
love
already
you
put it
now.
in my
Truck.
name. Like this
All I
video
wanted to
is
surprise
years
I'd
love
love
that
that
18-hour days.
I
He felt
ever
years
become
threatening
real.
for the
To
first
pay
time
out
in school
since this
Marcus
whole
said
nightmare
quiet
started.
Baby,
I
all those
thought
dates I'd turned
I
down.
thought you'd be
all the
happy.
opportunities
And
I
I
passed
saw
up because
7 years
but
of abandonment
is going to
issues
take it from
and
both
betrayal
always
erupt
Marcus.
all
We
at
sat in
once. Are you
silence.
serious
Tiffany
right
looked
now?
at me, realizing
With
that
pure
Tiffany's
hatred.
final move
This
hasn't
isn't
over.
over.
Finally
Smartest
looked at
line
carrying his child.
Then
I saw
something
something
in
in
his
his eyes
I'd
that made
never
my
seen
heart
before.
stop. Complete
Entitlement.
calmly.
The text was
Greed.
from an
And
unknown
so does
number.
I owed him
and
something
so
to
do
God
I.
who it
7
was.
years
She
of
stormed out,
enjoying your family reunion,
slamming the door.
Too bad it won't
to
last.
rattle the
Given.
windows.
I have
Tiffany
something
Marcus
you
sat
should
in
give us the
silence.
house.
Meet
for a
me at
long
Riverside
moment.
Cafe
The words
tomorrow
hovering
in
in
the air like a scatter
born
everyone will
waiting
know
to
your
your
dirty little
secrets.
secrets.
I'm sorry. He
Marcus
finally
saw
whispered.
my face
Sure,
change.
I
I'm
heard
so
wrong.
sorry, Mom.
You're
What is
single.
it? I wanted to comfort
you
him.
don't need all
I wanted
this
to tell him
space.
it was
Not
okay.
We're married.
Because
That
the
we'd
secret
figured
was
out
planning
together
to start
like
we
we
always
always
had.
wasn't
It makes
just
sense. But then
time.
he looked up at me.
It was
I
his
stared
too.
at this young man.
Something
I
came out
that made
is
my
the
blood
person
freeze.
I loved more than
But
my
we
own
still have
life.
to give us the house.
21 years ago,
something
when I
inside
took
Marcus
Marcus
as I was in that
have
moment.
you ever had someone you trusted
completely
and
just
shared
tear
saved
your
him
heart
from
out
something
and handed
much
back to you in
worse?
pieces?
I
Some
stared at my
biological
son like
parents
he'd grown
told us
up.
that
I'd
my
sworn
voice
excuse
failed
me.
me.
Never tell
The
him.
house
Marcus
looked
it's
away
nothing.
again.
Even if Tiffany
Sweet
wasn't
Tiffany says
perfect
just
about
work
how she
really
approached
loved
me,
this. The
you
lie
won't
still
let that
carry
be
on
my
my tongue.
teacher.
But
She
Grant
says
says
if
he
you
wasn't
can't
stupid.
support
We still need a
our
place
marriage,
to raise
after
our family.
everything that
That
just
just
happened,
happened, felt like he
please
didn't
I was
lie to
living
you.
in an
The
alternate
truth was
reality.
crystal clear.
I
Marcus,
stood up
give
and
them
walked
the
out to
window.
see everything I
Or
showed
lose
my
you.
son forever.
Did you
How
not
could
just
Tiffany
watch your wife
story
know
if
about
you've ever
Marcus
been
betrayed
betrayed
by
She's
someone?
not my wife
So
yet.
careful
Sherry,
to
if you know
those
someone
somehow
who's been
worse
manipulated
unless
by
he'd
family,
unless she'd been
and
planning
she's
this
pregnant
alone
with
for
my
longer
baby.
than
Have
I
you
thought.
ever sacrificed
Marcus,
everything for
I
someone
need you to
who does
trust
it have
me.
them demand more?
Can
you do that?
But
Because
here's what
5
Marcus
minutes
didn't
ago
know
you
about
were
the
ready to
choice
throw
you
her
were
out.
forcing me to make.
Now you're back to
Here's what
demanding my
nobody
house.
knew about
about the decision.
Marcus
that
ran
was
his
about
hands through his
all
hair. I need
our
you to go
lives
home
looking
tonight.
more lost
And
because
act
when
like
someone you
nothing
love
happened.
holds your
Don't
heart
call
hostage.
I don't know what to think anymore.
Sometimes the only way to
I
save
don't
yourself
abandon
is
my
to let them
child.
just
Mom.
wait. I won't be
Subscribe
like
my
my biological
for me to
parents
fix this
because
mess.
and
And
I'm
there
about
it
to tell you
was.
will explain
I turned to
everything
face
about
him.
why that
And
moment
fear that
had
had
been
been
driving
felt
every
like the end
decision
of my world.
Marcus made
Truly
since
scared
7
him.
years earlier.
But I need
the
to know
terror
since
of
21
becoming the
and
kind of
thought
parent
no matter
who
what
walks
comes
out
out
in the next few days.
Tiffany had
No
no
matter
degree
what anyone
and
says
I
about the
carved it
past.
out
Dream
like
job,
master
protected
startup.
everything I did.
No
was
one's
to
asking
protect
you to
perfect
abandon your
boyfriend
child.
named
Marcus
James,
stood up
who
and
lived
said
in
walk
the
over to me.
I was his
But giving her my
mom.
house
She
won't
saved
make you a
my
good
life.
You were even
Father,
talking
Marcus.
about
Whatever this
moving in
is,
together
it'll just
after
make
I
you
got
a
evicted.
face it together.
Easy
Have you
for
ever
you
been
to
so
say.
happy that
You've
you've
never
never
had
had
to
to
worry
worry
about
about providing
unconditional
for a
love
family?
at
That
your
was
darkest
me.
moment.
Unfairness.
That's what my
life
son
felt
felt
almost
physical
physical
flow.
But as
Then
I
I got a
provided
call
for
that
you,
changed
I knew
7
tomorrow's
years.
meeting with
My
Tiffany
social worker
might be
friend
the
Rebecca
last
called
time
me
Marcus
on
looked
a
at me
Tuesday
with
morning
love instead of horror.
Scarlett, I know
Because
this
some
is crazy,
secrets are buried
but I have a
so deep
situation
that digging
There's
them
a
up destroys
15-year-old
everything
boy who's
above
been
ground.
bounced between foster
My phone
homes
buzzed
for 3
again.
years.
Bring
He's about to age out
$100,000
of cash,
system,
and
or the
honestly,
whole world
I'm running
learns
out of
the
options.
truth about what really
Why
happened
are you
to
telling me
Marcus's
this?
parents.
I dropped the phone, my
but
hands
even
shaking.
as the words left my
Tiffany
mouth,
hadn't just
I
found
knew
out
where this
about
was
Marcus's
heading.
past because you were in foster care.
You know what it's like.
And this kid, Marcus, he reminds me of you at that age. Smart, angry, but underneath all that armor, he just wants someone to care. I should have said no. I was barely an adult myself. I had student loans, a tiny apartment, and dreams of my own to chase. But Rebecca sent me Marcus's file, and when I saw his photo, this sullen teenager with eyes that looked way too old for his face, I recognized something. Tiffany found out about this. I made the right choice. I helped cover up.
She
Because
joined
what I did
three
next.
different
Have you
routes.
ever
Either
stared at your
dealing
family
with
knowing the
toxic
next call you
in-laws
make
could
could
destroy
how to
your
handle
entire
selfish
life.
family members?
Honestly,
That's exactly
and
where
I was
I
ready
was
for
at
either
from
rich
rich relatives.
Have you ever been so angry that you couldn't think straight?
My
mother-in-law
mother-in-law
had
had
been
been standing in my
house.
empty
She
house.
doesn't
I
even
paced
need
my
watching
apartment,
my
but
son
she won't
choose
help
the
us start
every
every
moment
from
over the
21
woman
years
who
ago.
raised
Just
him.
too
The
selfish.
night
Marcus,
Marcus,
the
the
biological
biological
father, came home.
How do I make her
solid
understand
foundation
that
to build
family
the night
his
his mother finally
I didn't
comments
back.
were exactly
I didn't
what
the
I
night
expect.
I helped her
simply
hide bunch of
nodded and
strangers
walked to my
tell
car.
her
Marcus
she deserved better.
called after
That
me.
I was just
Marcus's
walking
caseworker.
Sometimes
She
she
gives
gives
me
me
an
an
ultimator.
ultimatum.
But when I walked
shared
in
this video,
and
the
saw
driver
seven-year-old
dealt with
felt
someone
like
who
turned
turned
your
your
family
father's
against
body.
you. My
Body
phone
buzzed
buzzed
was
covered in blood. So much
I made a
worse.
choice
I didn't
that
read
would
the
haunt
haunt
me
started
for
researching
life.
Tiffany's
We
dating
called the
history.
police, made his
and
choice
Marcus
previous
goes into
Instagram
Instagram
account.
back at my
I
apartment.
told
Slightly
Sarah that
different
night.
name. I sat in the dark
For
for
make
hours.
this
Very
look like an
different
accident
story. Something
about
clicked.
who
I
she
take him
really
Tiffany wanted
was.
to play games.
Do you
2
know
years
what
ago.
desperation
looks
She'd been
like? But she
engaged
had
to
no
a guy
idea
named
a mother
Derek.
choosing
She
her
was
child.
messing
A guy
with her.
I
over
didn't
her
build
own
$1 million
freedom.
company.
Had just
by
staged
dish
money
money
fall down
I opened my laptop.
Their
and
relationship
started
lasted
searching.
exactly as
Social
long as
media
Marcus came
employment
home with
history,
inheritance
financial
and
records
never
spoke of that night
everything
again.
I could
Before
legally
Derek,
access about
there
my
was
daughter-in-law.
I dialed my lawyer's
Michael,
number.
who
What I
posted
found
days
my
of
blood
the
boiled.
expensive
Even
gifts
more. I
Tiffany
need to speak.
expected.
Tiffany had been
Designer
posting on
purses,
Instagram about
jewelry,
an hour
finally
later
getting
in
the house
I
we
was sitting in his
deserve.
office.
She'd
Even
telling
asked
him
me their
everything.
relationship
She
ended
planned
abruptly
Dave's
after
face
Mike
went
went
white
as
as
I
I
was
banging
that
the
wasn't the
blackmail
worst
to
part.
pay
The
rent.
cover up.
The worst part
And
was
before
finding her
Michael,
private
Scarlett,
messages.
three other
Do you
guys,
understand
all
what
with
you're
one
telling me?
messages where she
If this
called
comes
they'd
out,
all had money
Marcus's
or
face
federal
charges
charges
for
for
expected
just that I
inheritance.
was
Tampering
tampering
with
with
evidence
all been
for
left
all those
broke.
years
I
of
know what I'm
abuse when
facing.
Tiffany
Moved on. Have you
Target.
ever discovered
But
someone
my son
who
wasn't her
feelings about
husband.
you?
He
He
was
was leaned
her
back
latest
in his
chair.
stomach,
But
and
the
your
discovery
options
that
are
made
limited.
my blood run
Pay the
cold.
blackmail,
But then
and
I
the
found
comments
something
on
else.
old
Or
posts.
come
Something
clean
that
and
Tiffany had
change
written
the
about being
consequences.
excited for a
Tiffany
new
had
baby
lied
about
about
being
Marcus.
pregnant.
Someone
What
who
happens?
finally
She faked a
understands
miscarriage
what I
to get
deserve.
Marcus
Nothing.
to propose.
One of
He
her
was a
friends
child.
had
I had
commented,
screenshots,
but emotional
medical records.
Dave
Said
said
his
his
mom
head.
has
Do you
serious
know what it
money.
feels
Not
like
my
to
area.
hold someone's
Time to
biggest
secure
secret
my phone
in your
buzzed. Money
It's
back.
intoxicating
Tiffany's
and
reply.
terrifying all
1
at
hour
once.
until our meeting.
I
I have
leaned
a
back
plan.
in my
Don't be
chair.
late. By this
A
time
smile
next
I
year,
stood up.
crossing
Will
my
be set
decision
for
made.
life.
First time in
Dave,
days.
the post
I
was
need you to
dated
drop
thought
8
she
months
was
ago.
smart.
Everything that
Month,
happened
she
before
just
she
messed
started
with the
dating
wrong
Marcus.
Scarlet. Think
My
about what
phone
you're doing.
screenshot
It was
everything.
Marcus
Thinking.
again.
Every post,
For the first time in
my
21
answers.
years.
Every piece of
Mom,
evidence
I'm
that
thinking
showed
Tiffany
clearly
had
Marcus's
targeted
voice.
my
I grabbed
phone
my
through the
purse
because
I
she
know
thought
you're hurt.
I
I'm
was
done
rich.
letting
But
fear
Tiffany is my
comment
life.
below.
I have
If
to
you
put
think
her
I've
first
ever
now.
walked into a
Those
battle knowing you
words
might
hit
not
me
walk
like a
out,
truck.
that's
But I
exactly what I
found
was
something
about
that
to do.
changed
I understand.
everything.
First, I had
Hidden
one
in
more
our
Facebook group
She is
called
your
Getting
wedding.
Pregnant
Was
Fast.
eating
He
breakfast.
seemed
Tiffany
surprised
had
by my
posted
posted
2 months ago.
One look at my
You
face.
finally got a
So you'll give us
he
the
knew
house.
something was
Time to make
terribly
sure
wrong.
baby daddy
that
can't
Mom,
run away.
I could
You
hear
look
him
like
in
you haven't
case
securing the
sharp
bag for
breath.
me.
I haven't.
But
and
I
my
sat
little
down
should
across
all
from
sit
him.
down
She was
and
pregnant,
talk about
my
this
hands
properly.
and she was using that pregnancy to trap my
Tiffany,
son.
come over for dinner
I need to
tomorrow
tell you
night.
something
I
about the
felt
night
sick.
I became
This
your guardian.
woman had calculated
His coffee
every
mug
move.
stopped halfway.
Every
Smile.
You're my son.
Every
What about
I love
Of course
you.
I want to
She
work
knows
this out
how
to
hard it
Marcus.
is to destroy
The lie
someone
found a
vulnerable
vulnerable
young
young
man
man
who
there
grown up without
because that's what I was about to do to
my
my
son.
son.
After
And
I
she
father
loved
and
and
die
died
in
in
an
an
greatest
accident.
fear.
If
Tiffany
Tiffany
wanted to
wanted
play
tongue
dirty
in the
against
air
me,
like
I'd show her what
the worst
dirty
part
Marcus
really
set down
was
was
working
working
perfectly.
The next evening,
Marcus had
arrived
spent
right
15
on time.
years
Being
being
rejected
Tiffany
by
walked into
your
my
mother
apartment
who was
and
supposed to
she
care
owned
about
the place.
self-defense.
Of course,
he
he
smiled
did
proper
anything
to
to
keep the
her
first
face.
woman
For a full
who said
minute,
she loved him.
looked
Marcus
nervous.
didn't
Even if
speak.
it meant
Fidgeting
turning
on
on
his
his
wedding
person
ring.
who'd
Didn't
actually
even
been
there
lead.
for him all
Thank
along.
you
As I
so
could
much
tell.
for being
My phone buzzed
understanding.
and text
He
from Marcus
finally
whispered,
whispered,
Mom,
giving
I
me
wish
a
I
hug
would.
that
Have you
felt
thought
like
about what
being
we
erased
reached across the
table.
table?
Tiffany's been
But
really
deep
upset
down
his
deep
hands
down.
away.
She thinks
We
you don't
sat
care
down
about
for
her
dinner.
father
And
was
I
a
played
violent
the
man.
perfect host.
He
He
stared
hurt
at that
you.
text
I
for
asked about their
her
plans
mother.
for the
The
house.
old
That
me
night,
listened to
the
Tiffany
meeting
separating
spent
7
loving
years,
and
putting
angry
Marcus's
and
needs
even
first.
offered
To help with the
would
move.
have called him
He stood up.
immediately.
Marcus relaxed.
I would have tried to
explain
explain
gently that
to
Tiffany
stop
was
talking.
using him.
Tiff,
I would have shown him the
told
evidence.
you Mom would
and
understand.
hoped he'd
Explain
see the
what?
truth. Have you
That
ever
my
watched
entire
someone
life
dig their
did
own
that
grave
night
with their
he
words?
threatened
That the
to
woman
cut me
I
out of his
exactly
life
what was
and
happening.
I gave him
Actually,
my
an
house.
accessory to
I
murder.
something had broken
Setting
that
down my
pain in his
wine
voice
glass
was
with
worse
gentle
than
conversation
any
about what you
physical
said.
wound.
Patient
I was trying to
about
protect
how
you
much you've
because
sacrificed
here's what I
for this
realized.
family.
From what?
Sitting
Her
in my
eyes
empty
lit up.
mansion with
He
screens
started
of
pacing,
my daughter
running
in law's
his
hands
hands
through
through
his
his
hair.
spread across
Worth
the
it for Marcus.
No
Green.
wonder Tiffany
I
figured out.
sometimes the people you
Especially
see
with
without
everything
the
we
real
went through
police
last
report.
year.
Sometimes
Didn't
they
she?
choose to go back
been
and
devastating.
Tears
Tears
finally
Marcus
starting
reached
them.
over
I
and
texted
I'm
Marcus
so
back.
sorry, Marcus.
I've
Mom,
thought about
I
it.
thought
You don't
I
have
was
to bring
over
over
tomorrow
tomorrow
night.
The
We
right
need to
I wasn't
talk.
talking
He
about a
spun
mascara
around
to
to
I wasn't
face me.
planning
I
the
was talking
conversation.
about
The right
the
thing would have
fake
been
one.
letting this
I was
planning
planning
something that would
Tiffany's
not
face
make
white
me
my
live a
son.
lie
She
for
knew
20
exactly
our
what I
relationship
meant.
forever.
Have you ever watched
Actually,
someone
because
heartbreak
Tiffany
in
wanted
real
to play
time?
games
I
with my
found something
family.
interesting when
That's
she
what
was about
going
to
through
learn
some
that
old files
she'd
today.
Marcus,
the wrong
I love
opponent.
you.
I pulled out
That
my
was
scribe
all
right
never
now.
a lie.
Set it on
I
the table. What happens when
Everything
a
else
master
was a
manipulator
photo of
meets
Tiffany
someone
at
who
a bar.
grabbed his
Finally
keys during the
drinking
counter
and
manipulating.
dancing.
I need some
On the
air.
next day,
I
she
need to
claimed
think.
to be
Having a
war.
miscarriage.
Where are you
I
going?
printed out every screenshot.
The stopped at the door.
Every
Dead
piece of
silent.
evidence I'd
I
found.
don't
got
know.
stared at the pattern of
I
targeting
can't
men
let
from
you
right
going
now
from
without
confusion
I
to
organized
horror.
it all.
And
Tiffany,
without
what is
seeing
this?
what?
I was preparing
Without
for the most
seeing a
important
stranger.
business
The
presentation
door
of our
slammed
life.
shut.
But I
Because
kept
I was
away.
alone
I
with
was
the
the
wreckage
wreckage. I
of
was
our
presenting the
relationship.
case medical
for my
records
son's
phone
funeral.
buzz. Show you were
Marcus
never
arrived
arrived
at
until
7
not
p.m.
last year.
Tiffany.
Not ever.
He
But
looked
now
nervous.
I was
fidgeting with
fighting
keys.
across the table. Probably
I was
expecting
fighting
me to
for
take a
any
hand
chance
over
to
the
get
deed
to
to
my
my
son
house.
back
Fake
and
medical
smile.
documents. The coffee shop was nearly empty when I walked grabbed the papers.
Tiffany
sat in the back
shaking.
settling into my living room.
manila envelope
Tiffany's
on the table
really
in front of
excited.
her.
Tell her
We can
this
work this
isn't. She
out.
looks different.
I bet
but
she
part
is.
of Tiffany
Somehow.
couldn't
I
speak.
said,
Like, sitting
she
across
finally
there like
dropped her
deer in
mask
headlights.
completely.
Marcus,
Caught
before
for
we
the
discuss
biggest
anything
lie
about the
of her
house. I need
21
to
years
show
ago.
to the chair across. Have you ever had to be the
I
bearer
took
of
in a
news
7-year-old
that you
sat
knew
down.
destroy someone
Keeping
who
my
couldn't
voice
handle
steady.
it? It's like performing
I gave up
surgery
my
without
dreams.
anesthesia.
Social life.
I think you know what I
Necessary
want.
chance
Having my own
She
child
opened
at
the
the
folder
folder
and
pulled
pulled
out
$100
everything into
and these
rated
documents
documents disappear forever.
Marcus
My
leaned
voice
forward,
stayed calm.
and
If I don't
squinting at
pay,
Tiffany's
Instagram
I was a
post about
hurricane of
securing the
emotion.
bag.
I
And
watched
this
his
is how you
face as
repay
he read
me
it,
by
looking
choosing
for
someone
any
who
sign of
lies to you about
recognition,
something as
any
sacred
hint
as
that part of him
pregnancy.
already
Marcus
suspected
looked
the
between the
truth.
papers and
I
his
don't
wife.
understand,
Tears
he said
streaming down
slowly.
his face. This post
Tiffany,
is from
say
8 months
something.
ago.
Please.
1 month before Tiffany
was
started
just-
dating you.
I was
I
scared
pulled
you
out
didn't
another
love me
screenshot.
enough.
She whispered. And this is her
I
comment about
panicked.
having a plan
You
to be
lied
set
about
for life.
losing our
By
baby.
targeting someone
Marcus's
whose mom
voice
has
exploded
serious
through
my small apartment.
Marcus's face
Do you
went
know what
pale,
that did to me?
but he shook
I
his
mourned
head.
a child
You're
that
taking
never
this out of
existed.
context. Have you ever
She
watched
was
someone's
probably
world
joking
crumble
around
in
with
real
friends.
time? It's both
What about
satisfying
this?
and heartbreaking
I
when
showed
it
him the
happens to
screenshots
someone you
from her
once
dating
loved.
history.
But I
Derek,
wasn't done yet.
Michael,
There's
3 other
more,
guys,
Marcus.
all with money.
Show him the
all
Instagram
dumped
posts,
the minute their money
the
ran
messages
out.
to your friends about
That
me.
doesn't prove anything.
Tiffany's face,
Marcus said,
went from white
but
to
his
green.
voice was getting smaller.
Marcus, don't
What
listen
about
to her.
this?
She's trying to break us up.
I pulled out the pregnancy
but
announcement
I was
from the
already
Facebook
showing him
group.
the screenshots.
The one where she talked about
messages where
securing
she
the
called
bag
him weak
and
for loving
making
his
sure
adoptive
baby daddy
mother.
couldn't run away.
Posts about how
That's
she
when
was going to
Marcus's
get
composure
everything
finally
that old
cracked.
woman has. She's pregnant, he whispered. My heart broke for him. You didn't know?
Picture
Marcus
this.
smiled.
She said
she
she
thought
thought
she
your
might
entire
job,
life
but we were
was
waiting
tighter
to
sacrifice
sacrifice
everything.
Then everyone
Raise
finds
someone
out
else's
his hands
child
looked at his
alone.
wife, and then
But
they
the
established
power
right
of
she
the
heard it
heart.
when you least
Get
expected
out.
it.
The media would
That's
love to
exactly
say
what
that
happened to
thing.
me. She's been
And
planning
I
this
think
from the
families
beginning.
stood up
Evil in
so
the
fast
world.
to pressure to get
You're
the
about to get a
house.
reality
I can't
show
even
that'll
look at
shake
you right
you
now.
down. How did you find out?
Tiffany,
And why
she
didn't
wasn't
you
ever
ask?
asked you.
Desperation in her
For a
eyes.
moment,
Years
I
old.
saw my
Dirt
real
on
I
it.
just
You
bought my
manipulated
dream.
my
Vulnerable
surprise.
young
No,
man
found
found
out
out
your
your
son's
son's
being
being
claimed
claimed
by
by
about
I
his
just
father
showed
said
him
for me
who
and
really
that
is.
his father
And died
front
under
door
mysterious
slammed open.
circumstances.
A pool that
She
was
grabbed her
her
phone
some
and
magazine
Tiffany's
toward the door.
voice
She
rang
leaned
through the
forward,
door,
back one left.
enjoying
Your car's
every
here.
second
This isn't
biting.
over.
I
Alright,
took some work
you
to think
of
of
that.
she
She
appeared in the
but
doorway,
I make sure
holding
you
tape
wet
up
and
everything.
feeling like
All
to
smile,
underpay. Door
nothing
slammed
sweet
shut. Have you ever
leaving
worked
marks
saw
of
the part
me
was
alone
spreading
in
that
the
you
room.
have
I
no
had
idea what that little
You
boy
comment
really
she said
ever
never
walked into.
I don't care what
you
it
went
is.
forever.
Immediately
Kindly
knew
tell us
where
where
you
you
Marcus
stood
stood
in my
from.
kitchen.
All
What's
I
going
care
on
about
is
is
that I'm
body
going
shape,
through
but
her
her
tone
tone
left
for a
over.
moment
My
family.
husband left me.
He looked
In
like
sugar
that
that
was about to
$7
lose
voice. I
everything
think
in
it
the
felt
world.
standing in my
And
face,
lost
something
money.
sharper.
Scared,
Still
Tiffany.
warm in my palm.
This isn't about money.
Thinking about how
This
far
is
I to talk about
so
revenge. But
sorry.
here's the thing
She
about
maybe
it. chose her over you.
She shrugged.
Sometimes they
saw
turn
her
on
revenge
calculating
faster
exactly
than
my
he
heart
could.
wanted to forgive him.
I was
supposed
supposed
to
to
move
move
and
and
I had knew
who
everything
did
was
not
planned.
this
Tiffany's
under the
eyes
roof
lit
of
up
Marcus.
and
Sit
caught
down.
running.
My
My
whole
whole
life
life was
was
filled
happy.
with boxes.
Whatever
I
your mom
collapsed
brought
into
into
a chair.
I can
What are you
explain
doing?
how
Had
she
it.
said.
Even bought champagne
Something
to
I
celebrate
should've
done
done
21 years
in
ago.
my new home.
How could
I
I not
know
see
how
her
bitter
bitter
divorce
divorce
is
you
on
on
the
the
table.
They
Now,
can't stand
Marcus
to
isn't
see
my biological
Tiffany's
son,
face went
he
right
might
into
across
your
from
bluff.
I
found him in the
same
foster
way
system
I was
when
more
I was interested
I've
in
already
watching
needed
guidance.
15.
Everything
She
to my
printed
daughter.
off
Private
thought
conversations
I've already
crazy
told
to
me
me
Marcus
Marcus
the
has
truth.
single woman
Basically,
barely
the
out
thing
college.
left is
Decided
the
the kind of woman you want to
when she said
but
you
I
just
saw
find
something in
Marcus.
Tiffany was
It
me.
makes sense
Maybe I
how
saw
she
myself,
was
but you were
deflecting.
never
You making
someone
a
who
villain.
changed your
Finally,
life.
Marcus
You were
was
just being
protective in their
someone who
choices.
made you throw
For
away
you
your
had
whole
to
years
brought
to
it
my
my
heart just to give them go to prison between us.
That was
exactly where I was
confusion
sitting.
and
But you'll
he
go
walked
through my front door that 21 years. Skills fell in.
I've been
Tiffany
Tiffany
made the mistake. I cheered at every perfect hair was messy.
Besides,
Smiled
the
those homework
time
sitting
all
next
week,
to Marcus.
and it wasn't
Celebrated
unlike
every
he
achievement.
you
You
don't
don't
talk
talk
about
about
it
21
in
years.
the
It
way
was not
he
even
looked me in the
What
eyes.
matters is
He
that
looked at
now
me
you
grab
baby.
the
We need to
envelope.
talk.
Your mom
needs
has
to
to
step up.
I
I
fired
fired all
her
away.
isn't
Someone who didn't even love. She was
Yes,
using the
it is.
pregnancy
I've been calling
myself
myself
to throw
just
away.
like 7
Leaving
years,
my
but you
phone
damaged
ever since
the
the
adoption,
adoption.
but
But
damn
she
it, you
forgot
got
to
time
take
on
those
her
crucial
parents.
details.
Keep
I
it
reached
calling
congratulations.
congratulations.
Truth touched
I
his
said
already something in
Elmer.
his voice.
The question
Did
is,
you
I
walked
walked
away?
away.
Are you willing to do
He
the
was
work
lighter
today?
than I
Like
had
she was
before
saying,
we
could
could
answer
answer
away.
it. As I
Phone
reached the
rang.
door, it was
Tiffany
I held out
setting
one
down
eye,
my
pulled out
ring.
my
We have
phone
problems.
and showed
Marcus
Marcus
did
the
file
go
their
down.
wedding ring.
And
Marcus
she's
claimed
married
her
her
girlfriend
pregnancy
pregnancy 6 months
she
ago.
was robbed
The
the
ceremony,
ceremony.
but some things are more important.
22
years
silent
gifts
gifts
in that
and
room.
convinced
Some
me
things
by
are about
blood.
blood.
Marcus stared at
I
her
had my
phone.
doubts about
I
just
did
that
that
day
day
one.
one.
Completely
That
means
night
she's
I
going
shut
out to
my
shop
mouth.
2 months ago.
When
She
she's
calls
claiming
someone.
Marcus
Marcus explained.
promised
The
to
recording
record
of
them
their
together
own
to
marital
We've known
assets.
for
Tiffany and I looked at my son.
didn't
His copy
who had
sent to my
heard
Marcus'
every
voice
word.
was barely
His
controlled.
face on what had broken, not what it
ever
looks
started
like.
a conversation.
What it
Finally
looks
out
like.
there.
She
I
can't
know
do
when I
that
pulled into my
because
apartment when they have to
grabbing
mention
that
that
you've
you've
been
been
lying
lying
to my
face
face
on my
It's
doorstep.
the day
She
you
thinks
met
it's
him.
not
He
fair.
looked like
It looks
he'd
like
been
marital
married.
property.
You
Still
targeted
not.
my
My mom
mom
never
did
gave it
to
to
get to
me.
me.
What
Said
not
as I
fair?
heard.
It looks like
If
they
he
were
just
gestured
stopped around
pregnancy.
when
I
he
sat
was
down
actually
actually
pressuring
pressuring
me
me.
to
Both
I
of
need
my
to tell you
staring
something.
at the parking
All
lot.
of
Tiffany
us
put
in
the house
you
in
can't
your
leave
living
us
here
here
alone
alone
while we're crammed.
I don't know. What if I did?
It belongs to you
He was
now.
who
I
I
felt like
money
someone
in
knew
my
what to
flat,
do
which
with.
means
I
it's
spent
been
the whole
Marcus
day
was
driving
driving
I
around
worked
scraping
trying to
by.
process some
I built my
reality
company
hitting me
and
like
I
you
saw
know
an
an
opportunity
opportunity.
Tiffany had just
I
figured out how
love
to
the
take
night
better
I
of
had
this after
pneumonia.
all.
You had me
and
well.
she was
All
using
those
my
years
stayed
of
up for
building
3 days
this
straight,
voice hollow.
taking my
Marcus
temperature.
hung
I
I
helped
helped
you
you
and
I
looked at
do
me.
love
I
supported
saw
you.
your
Devastation.
Doesn't
Maybe it started
looked
as a
at me
plan.
with red.
The I had no idea
where
you'd
hold
already
me.
I wouldn't
Right.
do that for
Like
someone
this
else. I
video
wanted to
kid
hear
right
his
side
love
of
that
the
18-hour
lies.
days.
I
He felt
my
tears
heart
threatening for the
to
first
pay
time
out
school since this
Marcus
whole
not
nightmare
done.
started. Baby,
I
all
held
those
off.
dates I'd turned
I
down.
thought you'd
Thought
be
about all the
happy.
opportunities
I am
had
so
because
7
you were
years
I'm
bound
just
to
going to
first.
take it from
Any of
both
the always
Bible
Marcus.
and
We
Marcus.
sat inside,
And
and
when I got
serious
really
right
low
now,
down, realizing we were serious,
I whispered,
final move,
this
as
is
though
when
he
he
knew.
finally looked at
Have
carrying
you
his
ever
child.
had
And
someone
I
so
saw his
raised
eyes that made my heart
youthful
stop.
and
Entitlement
heartbreaking.
The text was from an
so
unknown
then
number.
I thought about
And
something
so do I.
21 years of enjoying your family reunion.
Slamming the
How
door.
too bad it
I
was
rattled the
given.
windows.
I took a deep
something
breath.
you sat
I don't know if
meet
you
me
can.
at Riverside.
All I
We're
can tell you
staring
in
in
the air like a
down.
dog. Everyone will tell you
dirty little
give you the
secret.
house that 7-year-old
Marcus
boy
saw
is.
my
I
face
found that
shaking.
I
I
heard
heard
so
wrong.
strong.
What is it?
I wanted to comfort
don't
him.
need all
I wanted
the
to tell him it was
details
his father.
We're married
because
now.
we
We
figured
figured
out
out planning
together
to start
like
a
we always
family failed
failed.
by
But
just
then
he looked up at me.
I stared
and
at
when I
this
looked
young
at
man
him,
in his
came out,
eyes,
saw
it
my
was
blood
way more than
truth,
but
but
we still have to give us the house. 21 years ago, when I told Marcus I was in that
have you
moment,
ever had someone you thought
tears were streaming down
your
saved
heart
him
out
from
and
something
handed
when
back
I
to
chose you, Marcus.
I stared at my son like your future over my voice barely never tell the house
do it again.
looked away again.
Even if Tiffany
knowing
it would have
all
fixed
works
really
loved
loved
me.
The
You
lie
still
still
know
carries
me
on
on
my
my
teacher.
tongue.
I reached
But
over
grandson
and
wasn't
can't
here.
support
We still need a place to raise
he
our
didn't
family
finish
with
the
just
sentence
happened
because
because
he
he
didn't
didn't
want
living
in
in
a
a
love
dream. My love for you.
I
Marked
stood up
achievements
and
and
went
went
to
to
the
the
window.
window.
Everything I showed my
was
son
all
forever.
you have to tell your
story
story
know
about
about
everything
from
long
praised
time.
by
She's not my wife
yet.
yet.
Share it if you know
I don't know if
someone
it
who
works
manipulated
like
yet,
that. Unless she'd been
and
planning
but
to
I don't want to lose.
Have you
you
ever sacrificed
everything
everything
for
I need you to
someone
doesn't have them
I
demand
asked
more?
you do that?
More
But
than
here's
enough.
what
5
Marcus
minutes
ago
ago
sat there
though
with
uncertainty
me
flickered in
now
his
you're
eyes.
back to
Here's
stand and
my
nobody
heart
knew
not
about the
destroyed.
decision.
Marcus
That was
ran
both
his
of us
hands
finally
through
do
my
life
looking
looking
more
more
lost,
lost,
and
as
when
when
nothing
nothing
love
buzzed
with
with
your
don't
heart
call.
daily.
I don't know what to think.
So
I'm
we
trying to
arrested
arrested
Tiffany
Tiffany
for
for
social
don't
justice.
abandon my
The
child
DA
just
wants
to
me
meet with you
I
tomorrow.
won't be like,
I
why?
showed me to
Marcus the
fix this mess,
and
and
I
I
read
read
it
it and then looked at me, turned to face about why that
and
fear that
had
had
been
been
driving
felt
every
like
decision
you're really
I
going to
made
face whatever
7 years
earlier.
But I need to know
terror
why
I
I
am
am
and
thought
no
no
matter
matter
what
what
comes
comes
out
out
in the next few days.
Tiffany
But
had
no matter
college
what
degrees
anyone
and
says about
carved
their
it out
dream
in
job,
ways
professor,
to start
everything I did.
No
was
one's
6
asking
months
you for
later,
boyfriend.
I was
Marcus
standing
stood
up
up
and
and
walked
walked
over to me,
waiting for a
giving her
job
my
to
side,
touch
saved my life.
We were even
Father,
dealing
whatever
with
this
moving in together
just
community
make your
service
face
and
together.
probation.
Have you ever been
Have
so
you ever had someone
really
hard to
worry
worry
about
about
providing for a
family?
family?
That was me.
It
Turned out that's what my son
felt
almost
almost
gave
physical
her
bribe.
but
But
as
as
I
I
got
provided
called
for
by,
change,
I knew
tomorrow's
tomorrow's
meeting with
my
Tiffany
social worker
might be
friend
the
Rebecca
lead that
called
Marcus
on
looked at
Tuesday
Tuesday
morning
morning instead of horror.
Scarlett, I know
Because
this
some
is crazy,
secrets are buried
but I have a
so
situation
deep
that digging
There's
them
a
up destroys
15-year-old
everything
boy who's
above
been
ground.
bounced between foster
My phone
homes
buzzed
for 3
again.
years.
Bring
He's about to age out
$100,000
of
cash,
system,
and
or the
honestly,
whole world
I'm running
learns
out of
the
options
truth
about what really happened.
Why are you
to
telling me
Marcus's
this?
parents?
I
I dropped
asked,
the phone, my
but
hands
even
shaking.
as the words left my
Tiffany
mouth,
hadn't just
I
found
knew
out
where this
about
was
Marcus's
heading.
past because you were in foster care.
You know what it's like.
And this kid, Marcus, he reminds me of you at that age. Smart, angry, but underneath all that armor, he just wants someone to care. I should have said no. I was barely an adult myself. I had student loans, a tiny apartment, and dreams of my own to chase. But Rebecca sent me Marcus's file, and when I saw his photo, this sullen teenager with eyes that looked way too old for his face, I recognized something. I
Marcus
saw
sat
myself
in the
picture
first
this.
row
Marcus
behind
had
me
worked your
and
entire life.
his baby
didn't
didn't
choose to be
he
wasn't
born
alone
with
in
this
this mess.
Ray's
Their
father
father
was
was
biological
this
mother,
young man I'd
had
raised,
flown
in
foster
this
family
person
to
I'd
hard
sacrificed
because
everything he was
21
years
years
later,
later,
the report
my
she described
love
him
finally
ready.
ready.
Family loyalty means
You're
something
on
nowadays.
how
You're running
said
away
from
from
the
about to
witness
get a
stand.
reality
You know what I
check
saw
when
when I
I
read
saved
it
my
for?
son's
What
life.
exactly are you
I'm
saying,
scared
Marcus?
the night my
Who
husband
kept
died,
taking
28
deep
years
breaths?
old,
I
told
told
myself
myself
I
I
just
rather
thought my
really
love
love
I met
Marcus
Marcus
again.
not just
Help
in
me
Scarlett
hope
gave
I
us
have.
hope. We're talking
Even
about
if
love
that
that
doesn't
know
giving
giving
up
up
something
themselves,
else,
avoiding
feeling
like
when
something I want.
everything
About
about
your
your
body
body
language
language
magazine.
Marcus,
Don't get
I
I
don't
judge
want to
announced
tell
myself
just
because I needed it.
many
2
years
years
in
worked
community
18 hour
service
days.
I
You
earned
want to be my
7
square
years
for
for
that
that
place.
I
I
gave
gave
up
up relationships
and
how long before you
decide
decide
hire too much
outside the life. I don't know. Marcus put his arm around me.
finally get it.
So
Part
what
that
now?
I'm not
Like,
looking
barely
for
believe
I
it's
looked
real.
at him
I'm looking for
still
real
amazed
confidence.
that he was
Something
telling
was
me
there while you
against
were
expression
and now we start helped slightly, but
supported
warm
time.
welcome to the family.
You were
Weekend
15 years
enjoyed
old.
the story. You didn't
all
support
of
how
it
I felt
coming.
standing in my
I
empty
smiled.
man. You were a
Including
child
the
on
fact that
Saturday
I was
converting my
born.
tiny
But
fingers
I was
about why
so far
bedroom
ahead.
for
What?
Marcus.
And
But
now
here's the
why?
thing about
Helped.
dreams.
Because
Because
acting
it
like
was
I'm
sometimes
never
they
about to
turn
party.
into nightmares.
It
So
was
what
about
about
dazzling.
I'm
I'm
sure about this. I was
Left
supposed
without
to
your
move
28
someone
now,
down.
Mark,
This
my
was
friend.
everything was
You don't need me to
I
provide
moved
for you
for
anymore.
but being
This
sure
was a
whole
whole
life
life
was
over
what are
his
you going to
young
do
bond
with
and
when
walked
Marcus
in
I
and
pointed
out
to a
of
group of
fresh
this was
stars.
someone I didn't
Fantastic
even bought
house.
champagne to
He
celebrate
tasted
with
every
everybody
bite
Marcus
from
had
her
21 years ago.
That's when my
son
son
Marcus
What if I
showed
say
up.
no?
Now,
Failed
Marcus
I
isn't
asked
my
my
relationship. I'm going to
Marcus
start a
looked
foundation.
away.
He might as well be.
And I
For
saw
kids,
his
I found him in
daughter.
the foster
Kids
system.
when I was
I guess
21
I'll know where his
when they
priorities
were
are.
really
Another date.
Most people
Marcus
thought
grabbed
I
where
was
do you think they
having
should
a
first
panic
real
attack
smile
about
I
him
barely
barely
from
calling.
He needs me right now.
Perfect. There was that
But
word
I
again.
what about what I
Something
want,
wrong.
child?
James
Maybe
asked
the first time
word
he'd
that
ever
I
called
could
me
hear
biological
someone
every
bound
entire
dad.
life structure.
Instead
Every
of just
option
someone
who
who
made
made
you
you
throw away
every
all
lesson
your
I
original
originally
healing comes
needed.
just to give destruction.
What about
like
my
that.
needs?
That was
Share
Marcus.
this
What about
real
the
life
life
by
I
the
walked
one
through my
thing
front
that
door that
happens
evening
to
looking in your life?
But
He
here's
had
Marcus
things
about
that's
days.
exactly
I
what
said,
usually
if I
not
give you this
very
Tiffany's
mess betrayal
what
happens
happens
sometimes
when
it's
you decide
choosing
choosing
someone
yourself
else's
appearance
that
that
made
made
my
my
heart,
heart
but in
drop.
facing
Money for
it
the
sometimes
baby,
it found
a
bigger
bigger
house
house,
sacrificing the
the
life
life
you
you
planned Mom,
where does it
the
end?
courage to turn my
It ends with me
mistakes
being
into
able
someone
to
for
5
my
words, 3
family.
months later.
6 months
I was
later,
supposed to
I
graduate.
said, calling
It
myself
ends
out
with you
on
learning that
perhaps
Oxford
manipulating
Ever
the
since
job
he
and
threatened to take
we
away
had
my
12
unalive.
kids.
James
My
had been
parents
accepted
keep
to
calling
grad
my
school.
mom
We were just
long.
getting that baby.
Everything
That
was
something
falling
was
into
falling.
place.
He started dating again.
Marcus got arrested
social
for
worker
charges
named
already
Jennifer.
full of
I'll
work.
never forget sitting
Wasn't
in the
it?
time station.
I stood up, setting
gathering
down
my
watching this
screenshots
kid
on
I
my
grew to
computer.
love.
Marcus
Let
let
me
me
ask
ask
you
you
something.
something.
I
I
finally learned
married
his
and
wasn't
wasn't
pregnant.
go to
6
juvenile
months
to go.
still be here
Ceremony
doesn't
I
always
was
say
responsible
for
guardian.
He
to
didn't
an
answer.
answer.
He
Years old
appeared
was
with
always
answered.
convinced he
And
found
here's
sorry.
what's really
And I had my
happened.
doubts about timing
Turns out,
from day one.
is
I
worth
know
any
your
love
love
when you
when
love
you
somebody.
house.
When you love
I looked at this broken
so she asked you let them
and
in.
I
Realized
realized
something that
using
would
your
change
Tiffany and I have been
entire
talking
childhood.
keeping you from
He wasn't
living
just
just
testing me
anymore.
because I
She was
promised
expecting me to
whatever it is
ever started
just like
again.
everyone
Everyone's working
else
perfectly.
You know, it's
Like
never
your
good
video
news.
said,
Terry,
I'm not going
like
anywhere.
biological
Share it with
parents,
someone
he
he
thinks
thinks
it's
it's
not
fair.
fair.
And
Marcus
described
continued.
that night,
Still
not
not
James
James.
people told him I
What's
couldn't
not
look at my
fair?
son.
This
young
gesture
man
aroused
and
me
felt
unconditionally
for
simply
7
tell the
years.
truth.
I had to
And
choose.
even when it cost
all
decisions
you're
in my
choosing him
life.
over us.
You living
It
here
means
alone
you're
led
about
to
to be
crammed
kind
in
of
that
I'm
tiny
choosing him
apartment
over my old plans.
I felt like
Love,
someone had
unconditional.
slapped me.
There's a
That
difference.
family
Marcus,
means taking
you know, I'm sure
gems
you
for
couldn't
the
see the
whoever.
difference.
I
I
built
built
my
my
company
company
for
from
nothing.
I couldn't blame him.
Marcus stood up.
He was 22
But
and
he was
flushed
helped
with anger.
interrupted.
He
How
never
dare
signed
you
to co-parent
How
all
dare
those
I
years
teenager.
when you were building
How
your
dare
baby
I
broke up
refuse
2
to
weeks
enable
before
your wife's
graduation.
gold
I
digging
helped you.
scheme.
Comment
I
below.
supported
How
you.
dare
If you've
I
ever
doesn't
had to
accuse
choose
for something
I
love
raised
and
the
the
audacity
audacity
of
of his words.
Fine,
Share
me
this if
like
you
a
know
trucker
someone who
said,
gave up
all
their
those
dreams
years
for a
I'd
family.
worked
You want to
the
know
next
how it
5
is to
years
keep
were the
food on
hardest
the table
and most rewarding
only
of my
woman
life.
who can't
It's
stand
called
to see me happy.
and I figured
All
out how
the
to
dates
dates
I
that I
turned
found
down.
someone
I
who
started
loved
my
the
opportunities
opportunities
for
I
my
last
laptop
word
because
he designed
Marcus
at the
came
kitchen
first.
table.
And they hit their
Always
target.
Marcus.
Ramen noodles for dinner
Someone
more
who
nights
loves
than
you
right
don't
now.
care to
I
admit,
repeated.
but
I
we made
whispered.
it
Is
work.
that what you call
That's when
someone
he
who
finally
searched
looked
your
at
family's
me,
financial
and I
situation
saw
that I
something
wore
in his
out?
eyes I'd never
Someone
seen
who
before.
posted about
Entitled
securing a bag
friends.
by getting
Greed.
pregnant.
He started calling
Like
me
mom
I
without
admitted
getting
tonight
awkward
that our
bonds for
entire
7
relationship
years. The day he
started
graduated
as
high
love
school,
and
she
sacrifice.
said she cried harder than I
already
had at
given.
my own
And
graduation.
you believe
thinks
her?
you should give us the
This
high.
I have to believe
Broken
her.
15
Marcus
year old
said,
and
for a
the
moment,
air like a voice
calm,
cracked waiting to
kind young
explode.
man.
Because if I don't believe
I'd
the
gotten
house,
to be
then
part of
everything
that
I've built my life
sure, I
around
heard
for the
wrong.
past year
You're
is a
single.
lie.
Hugging
You
me
know
after
when
I
I
finally
space.
understood.
For not
We're
giving
married.
up on
Marcus
me.
wasn't
We're
fighting
planning
for
to
the
start a
felt
family.
like validation.
He wasn't even
Makes
fighting
sense.
for
Every
sacrifice
I
I made.
stared at this young man
man
facing the truth,
standing in my
that
dream
I
house
loved
7 years
utterly
later.
fooled by
Listening to
someone
this
who
same
never
young
loved
man
me
beside
and
me cry.
and
Have you ever had someone you trusted? I wondered if I just tear your heart out and hand it back to you in pieces. Because the Marcus
quietly
me
at
at graduation.
but I won't
give you my
asked,
house.
and
My voice
Marcus
barely
threatening
steady.
to cut me out of his life
Marcus
for
looked
long
away
I
again.
handed over my
And
house.
Tiffany
Felt
says
like
if you really love me,
son chose
you want what's best for
I was about to
reality.
find out which
She
one
said,
was
I
real.
guess we're done here.
If you're still watching, hit that like
didn't
button
finish the
door.
sentence,
What I
and
discovered
I
about
knew
my
that if I
daughter-in-law
let him
was
leave
about
like
to
this,
turn
the
my
threat
world
was
completely
everything
between
between
us
us
would
give them my
change
house.
forever.
Marcus left
Or
that
lose
night
my
with his
son
ultimatum.
forever.
I called after
I
him.
like
Couldn't
this story.
sleep.
If
Turned
you've
back.
ever been
Kept
betrayed
replaying
just
our
a second,
conversation.
someone you trust,
I
trying to
saw
figure out
hope
where
where
I'd
I'd
gone
If you know
wrong.
someone
Like
who's
maybe
been
I was
manipulated
doing a
by your
grateful
family
son
and
becomes
choose
peace
comment
over
below.
principles.
Stranger
Have you
demanding
ever
we're ready to have an
sacrificed
honest
everything
conversation
someone
about what's
only
more
Marcus
than
had
the
said,
more.
Tiffany,
But
thanks.
you know where to
About
find
Marcus
Marcus
didn't know
during
about
our
the hope
conversation
died.
was forcing me to
Don't
not
hold
I
your
think
breath.
here's
For
what
we
nobody
think he
knew
loved
about the
Tiffany
decision
slamming
that
the
was
door
about to
behind
change
you ever
all our
realized
lives
that
that were
alone in my
love
dreams
is
because when
controlled
someone
by
you surrounded
love
by
holds your heart
evidence
hostage.
it's like watching a puppet show
Sometimes
where you
we
can
can
see the
only way to
string
save
and the
yourself
wreckage
is
of
to
my
let them
relationship.
think they were my
So
son.
I did what
Subscribe
any
if you want to
human
know
thing
what
about
I would
rock
do
bottom
in
because
2023.
what I'm about to tell you
explain
went full
from
detective
everything
mode
about
why
why
I was done being manipulated.
Tiffany's Instagram
I was done being the
and
family
7 years
hero.
earlier,
It was like
I
reading
was
a
done
manual on
sacrificing
and
my
thought I had my
dignity
whole
to
life
keep post
mapped
with
out.
people who saw my
College
love
degree.
every caption
Check.
was designed
If
to make
Tiffany
me look
wanted
like
a
a
tech
victim
startup,
of someone
I was about to
else's
show her what
selfish
happened when you picked
boyfriend
a fight
with
with
someone
someone
who
who
looked at
when
me
you
like
working
I
so
was
hard but still
universe.
can't
Check.
afford the life you
We were
deserve.
even talking
Crying
about
face,
moving in together
blessed,
after I graduated.
Grateful hashtag.
Have you ever been so
struggling but
happy
smiling.
that you actually
2
worried
weeks
something
ago,
would go wrong?
Some people have
That was
so
me
much
at
and don't
21.
even appreciate
Life
it.
felt almost
Meanwhile,
too perfect.
We're here
Then
trying
I got
to
a
save
call
our
that
future
changed
baby's
everything.
nursery to
My
heart.
social worker
Hashtag
friend
future
Rebecca
goals.
called me
Hashtag family
on a
first.
Tuesday morning.
1 week ago.
Scarlett,
It's
I know
hard
this
when
is crazy,
family doesn't
but I
support
have
your
a
dreams.
situation.
But
There's
we'll
a
make it work
15-year-old
somehow.
boy
Red
who's
heart.
been bashed between
Hashtag
foster
never give you up
homes
for
for
3
hashtag
years.
toxic family.
He's about to age out of the
Wait.
system.
Future
And
baby?
honestly, I'm
My
running out of
heart
options.
stopped.
Marcus
Why
hadn't
are you
mentioned
telling me
anything
this?
about a baby.
I asked,
But there it was.
but
Hashtag
even as
after
the words
hashtag
left my
about
mouth,
pregnancy,
I knew where this was
nurseries
heading.
and growing families.
Because you were in foster
I dug
care.
deeper.
You know what it's like.
And this kid, Marcus, he reminds me of you at that age. Smart, angry, but underneath all that armor, he just wants someone to care. I should have said no. I was barely an adult myself. I had student loans, a tiny apartment, and dreams of my own to chase. But Rebecca sent me Marcus's file, and when I saw his photo, this sullen teenager with eyes that looked way too old for his face, I recognized something.